53,4. A forgotten soldier. The auction yard pulsed with summer heat, the air thick with cattle musk and kettle corn sugar. Men barked bids over rusty tractors and pregnant goats, but on the far fringe where sun-bleached crates sat like orphaned luggage time seemed to stutter. Lot 42, a skeletal German shepherd with one ear folded like a tired flag, lay motionless while the crowd snickered. "Worthless," muttered a rancher, already turning away. That's when 11-year-old Eli Barrett shuffled forward, coffee tin clutched to his chest. Inside, birthday quarters, lawn mowing, singles exactly $53.4. He wasn't tall enough to see over the rail, but the moment those storm-colored eyes met the dog's amber gaze, the world narrowed to 2 heartbeats. $53.40, he declared. Laughter rippled, but Eli didn't blink. He saw a soldier where they saw scraps. Why did the dog's ribs spell stories no one else could read? Why did a boy with nothing stake everything on a dying stranger? Whatever answer waits, it will set fire to a sleepy town, drag secrets from foreign deserts, and prove that broken hearts can still save lives if someone is brave enough to pay the price. The late afternoon sun bled over the rolling hills of Clearwater, painting the sky in shades of rust and gold. Dust hung thick in the air, kicked up by boots and hooves across the county fairgrounds. The air smelled of livestock, kettle corn, old leather, and the last stretch of summer restless and fading. Children darted between tractors and pens. Adults bartered over fencing equipment and saddles, and the auctioneer's voice crackled over the loudspeakers like static thunder. "Next lot sheep? Registered? Bred? Good stock? Who'll start me at 50? But none of that mattered to Eli Barrett. He stood small and steady at the edge of a livestock ring, clutching a dented, rusted coffee tin with both hands. Its weight was uneven not heavy in metal, but heavy in meaning. Inside were wrinkled dollar bills, birthday coins, a few silver half-dollars that had once belonged to his father, and even a folded $5 bill his mother had slipped into his coat pocket without a word. Every cent was hard-won. Sweeping porches, mowing lawns, and cleaning out the chicken coop for the neighbors. Eli hadn't told anyone exactly what he was saving for, not until today. He couldn't see over the heads of most adults, but he shuffled closer through a gap between 2 hay bales and found himself at the edge of the small, overlooked section, Canines and Companions. It wasn't an official name, just a handwritten sign tacked to a crooked fence post. In truth, it was more like an afterthought, a sad corner for dogs no one wanted, animal strays from shelters, older farm dogs, and even a few retired working dogs from bankrupt programs or dissolved agencies. And then, there he was. Lot 42, male, German shepherd, approx. 5 years. Some health issues, former training program candidate, returned twice, no guarantee. The words were scribbled lazily on a laminated card zip-tied to the corner of the crate. The dog didn't even lift his head when the auctioneer read it out. "Who'll start at 100? 80? 75? Silence. The German shepherd lay with his back to the crowd, thin enough that his ribs made ridges beneath the dull, patchy fur. One ear stood halfway upright, the other drooped like a wilted leaf. His hind leg had a small scar that cut through a furless patch, and his paws were worn from years of hard ground. A single fly landed near his eye, and the dog didn't even twitch. "He's a ghost," someone behind Eli muttered. "Should have been put down," another said. "He ain't got 5 minutes of work left in him." Laughter, low, pitying, dismissive. But Eli didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his grip tightening around the tin. The dog's crate was old wire twisted at the edges, a piece of rope holding the latch shut. He knelt slowly, ignoring the dirt staining his jeans, and that's when the dog moved. It wasn't much, just the barest shift of muscle and a lift of his tired eyes. But in that moment, the world fell away. The ring, the dust, the auctioneer's droning chant, the hum of diesel engines, all faded into silence. The dog looked at him, not through him, at him. And Eli knew. It wasn't pity. It wasn't a child's fantasy. It was recognition. Like something inside the dog had stirred, cracked open, and reached toward him from some distant place of loss and memory. Like a forgotten soldier rising at the sound of a name. 50, Eli said, his voice quiet but unwavering. The auctioneer blinked. 50? From the boy in the red flannel. Do I hear 60? Nothing. Not a sound. Someone in the back chuckled. Let the kid take him. Better than a bullet. Sold. Lot 42. To the boy with the tin can. A half-hearted clap went up from somewhere. One of the handlers came over with a battered leash and a hesitant smile. You sure, kid? That one ain't much to look at. Eli stood and opened his tin. He didn't count it out loud. He already knew the total. $53.40. Every cent he had. He handed it over, then turned toward the crate. The handler opened it with a creak. The dog didn't bolt or bark. He just stood. Slow, hesitant. And then he took a step forward, and another, until he was standing beside Eli, his head lowered, body brushing the boy's leg knot enough to knock him, just enough to say, I'm still here. What's his name? Eli asked. The handler shrugged. Paperwork says Ashcroft. They called him Ash. Eli reached out and ran a gentle hand down the dog's neck. Ash, he whispered. Okay, let's go home. As they walked across the field, the low sun casting long shadows, whispers followed them. That boy's out of his mind. That dog won't last a week. Wasting his breath. But Eli didn't hear them. Or if he did, he didn't care. Beside him, Ash walked with a limp, but there was something noble in the way he held his head, like some part of him remembered who he used to be, and, maybe, who he could be again. At the edge of the field stood Marla Barrett, Eli's grandmother. She was a tall, wiry woman in her early 70s, with silver hair tied back in a braid and boots that had seen more seasons than most trucks. Her arms were crossed, but her eyes were soft, watching not just the boy, but the dog beside him. As Eli approached, Ash stopped. Then, to Marla's quiet surprise, he leaned into Eli, gently, purposefully, not for support, but for belonging. You picked quite the partner, Marla murmured. I didn't, Eli said, brushing dust from Ash's coat. He picked me, and in the dying light of that long Clearwater evening, with dust curling like memory through the golden air, a boy and a dog walked home together, not as rescuer and rescued, but as two souls finally found. The metal clang of the gavel echoed like a gunshot across the auction yard. Sold. Lot 42, $53.40, the auctioneer declared, half amused, half indifferent. Laughter rippled through the small crowd. $53? Someone snorted. For that bag of bones? Kid just bought himself a vet bill. But Eli Barrett didn't flinch. He clutched the battered coffee tin close to his chest, as if it were something sacred. His shoes were scuffed, soles nearly coming loose, and his red flannel hung just a little too big, a hand-me-down from an older cousin. But his spine was straight. His steps were steady. The handler tall, sunburned, smelling of hay and motor. Oi looked from the boy to the dog in the cage and back again. You sure, kid? That dog's seen better days. I'm sure, Eli said softly. He approached the cage, slow and respectful, not with the eager bounce of a child who just got a new pet, but like someone approaching a tomb that might still breathe. Inside the crate, the German shepherd lay curled into himself, tail limp, breathing shallow. His fur was a patchwork of grays and sables, but time had dulled its sheen. One of his hind legs trembled involuntarily. Around his neck was an old, faded collar with no tag, just a frayed strap of leather that had weathered both storm and neglect. Eli knelt down. At first, the dog didn't react. But then, as if sensing something different, in the air not fear, not pity, but presence, stirred. Slowly, painfully, his head lifted, and their eyes met. Eli's heart paused, not because of what he saw, but because of what looked back. They were amber, those eyes, clouded slightly at the edges, but still sharp enough to slice through skin and soul. Eyes that had seen too much of war, perhaps, or betrayal. Eyes that didn't ask for rescue, only recognition. He didn't bark. He didn't cower. He just watched, silent, measured, almost soldierly. And in that moment, Eli saw him not as a mangy dog in a crate, but as something else entirely. A soldier left behind, a comrade unclaimed, a warrior no one waited for. The boy reached out, not to touch, but to rest his hand just above the latch. You're not done yet. Eli whispered, barely audible beneath the drone of auction chatter behind him. "Come with me." The dog didn't move, but he didn't look away either. And that was enough. By the time the handler opened the crate, some folks had wandered off, looking for more excitement elsewhere. Just a boy with a tin can and a beat-up dog? Nothing viral in that. But Marla Barrett, standing off to the side with her weathered boots and the kind of eyes that missed nothing, watched every second in silence. Ash stepped out slowly. No lunge, no collapse. His back legs shook a little, but he found his balance. The crowd noise faded. All he saw was the boy. All he moved toward was him. Eli rose to meet him, one hand outstretched. Ash lowered his head, pressed it gently into the boy's palm. There was no wag, no jump, just that one moment. An oath, unspoken, but unbreakable. They walked side by side toward the exit, with the leash hanging loose between them. The handler had offered it, but Eli didn't need to pull. Ash didn't need to be led. They just moved in rhythm, like two soldiers on familiar ground. Behind them, someone tossed out a last remark. "That dog's a waste, kid. He ain't gonna make it through the week." Eli didn't turn around, but under his breath, as Ash limped beside him, he murmured, "Then he gets that week with me." Outside the auction ring, the sky had started to burn gold with evening. A breeze rolled through the dry grass, carrying the scent of old wood, leather, and something faintly metallic like memory. Eli opened the passenger door of his grandma's old pickup. Ash hesitated. His front paws reached the step, but his body faltered. "Hang on," Eli said gently, and hoisted him up not cleanly, not easily, but with both arms and all the strength a boy of 11 could give. Ash settled into the seat with a groan, then shifted to look out the window as if he hadn't seen the outside world in years. Eli climbed in next to him, and for a while, they didn't drive. They just sat there. Marla watched from the porch, arms crossed, but not in disapproval. After a minute, she called out, "Well, what do you call him?" Eli looked at the dog. The name from the auction tag Ash lingered in his mind like smoke, burnt edges, blackened soil, the remains of something that once blazed bright. It felt right. But it wasn't enough. He turned to Ash and said quietly, "From now on, you're not just Ash. You're mine." The dog blinked slowly, like he understood. "Welcome home, soldier." "Oh." And with that, Marla turned back inside. That night, Eli made up a bed for Ash in the old tool shed behind the house. It wasn't fancy, just a folded blanket, a shallow bowl of water, and a beam of moonlight that came through the cracked roof like a quiet promise. Ash didn't complain. He lay down slowly, turning once before settling in. Eli sat beside him, knees hugged to his chest. He didn't speak again that night, but as the crickets sang and the wind moved through the grass, the boy reached out and rested a hand lightly on Ash's back, feeling the slow rise and fall beneath thinning fur. And the dog didn't pull away. The gravel crunched beneath Eli's worn sneakers as he led Ash down the narrow path behind the house. The air was cool now, tinged with the sharp scent of pine and aged hay, as if the land itself had taken a breath after holding it all day. Behind them, the lights from the modest farmhouse dimmed, casting long shadows across the open field. Ahead stood the old barn, once used for horses in the days before Eli was born. Now it sat like a relic of another life, slanted and weary, with a crooked weather vane squeaking softly in the wind. Ivy crept up one wall, and the paint peeled like sunburned skin. But to Eli, it was the safest place in the world. He pushed the door open with both hands. It groaned on its hinges, revealing the dim interior, a dust-laced silence filled with the sweet musk of wood and old straw. Ash paused at the threshold. His ears twitched, not in alarm, but in memory. The cool floor beneath his paws, the hollow sound of steps in wood, it all reminded him of somewhere he couldn't quite place a kennel maybe, or a stable in a faraway base, somewhere before everything hurt. Eli looked back. "It's not fancy," he said softly, "but it's dry, and it's yours." Ash took a tentative step forward, then another, and followed the boy inside. In the far corner, beneath a broken loft ladder and an old oil lamp, Eli had already prepared a spot. He laid down his favorite blanket, the rocket ship one, faded from too many washes, but still warm and full of dreams. He'd outgrown it, technically. But tonight, he was giving away more than a blanket. He was giving away the only thing he ever slept with when he felt scared. Ash sniffed it, then lowered himself slowly, joints stiff, breath shallow, and rested his weight against the ground like each inch of movement required negotiation with pain. But once settled, he let out a long, trembling sigh. Eli crouched beside him, careful not to startle. The dog's fur was coarse, thinned in spots, but still warm under his palm. Ash didn't flinch at the touch, didn't shy away. He simply shifted and let his shoulder brush the boy's knee. It was small, but it was trust. The kind of trust that can't be asked for, only offered. From the open barn doors, Marla Barrett watched in silence. The porch light behind her cast her frame in soft silhouette, wiry arms crossed, silver-streaked hair pulled into a loose bun, her apron still dusted in flour. Her eyes had seen too much in this life to be easily impressed. But something in that moment stilled her. The boy, the dog, the quiet between them. She wasn't sure whether to step in or step back. Ash didn't look like much, sickly, slow, covered in old scars. The kind of dog most folks wouldn't give a day, let alone a home. But Eli had seen something else. And now, so did she. "I named him Ash," Eli said, sensing her there without turning. "From fire, from what's left." Marla stepped closer, arms dropping to her sides. "That so?" "Yeah," Eli replied. "Not 'cause he's burnt out, but 'cause Ash means something burned bright once." The old woman didn't answer at first. Her gaze drifted to Ash, who blinked slowly, eyes following her, the way a soldier tracks motion aware, but not threatened. "He's a smart one," she murmured. "Knows things. You can see it in the way he watches." Eli nodded. "I think he remembers." "Remembers what?" The boy looked down, hand still resting gently on Ash's back. "What it meant to matter." Marla felt something catch in her throat. She covered it with a cough and stepped back toward the door. "Well, he's got shelter, and he's got you. That's a start. I'll stay with him tonight," Eli said quickly. "Just till he settles." Marla didn't argue. She just nodded and turned away. But before she vanished into the night, she paused. "You got a vet plan?" Eli hesitated. "Not yet." "You got a plan at all?" The boy looked up. Number just a promise. And that, somehow, made her smile. Later that night, the wind picked up, whistling through the barn's cracked slats. Eli lay curled on a second blanket a few feet from Ash, but the space between them had shrunk. The dog, though clearly aching, had inched closer until his body lightly touched the boy's ankle. Eli didn't move. Ash didn't either. They just breathed, one breath at a time, one moment at a time, like two souls trying to remember how to belong. And in the darkness, Marla watched from the kitchen window, holding a chipped mug of tea, eyes misted over not from the steam but from something older, something she hadn't let herself feel since Eli's father left the uniform behind in a casket. Hope, not loud, not bold, but flickering again in the form of a boy and his broken dog. The mornings came early at the Barrett farmhouse. Before the crows stirred and before the school bus groaned down the dusty road, Eli had already slipped out the back door boots, half-laced, hair still tangled from sleep, a dent in his cheek from the pillow. He carried a dented metal tray in his arms, its contents rattling gently. A chipped bowl of softened kibble mixed with warm broth, a battered brush with half its bristles gone, and a worn paperback titled Training the K-9 Soldier, one of his dad's old books he'd rescued from a box in the attic. The barn creaked as he entered, the same familiar groan like a tired sigh. Inside, the air smelled of straw, wood, and something else now. Something alive. Something healing. Ash lay in the corner, tucked in the same patch of light where Eli had placed the rocket ship blanket. The dog's frame still trembled faintly when he shifted, his hind legs stiff and curled inward, but his eyes flickered open the moment Eli's boots hit the floor. Not startled, not threatened, just aware. "Morning, soldier," Eli said softly, kneeling down. He set the tray beside Ash and waited, not forcing it, just watching. The German shepherd sniffed the food with mild interest, then nudged it gently before lapping up a few bites. It wasn't much, but it was more than yesterday. Eli smiled faintly. "You're getting better," he whispered. "Told you this place was magic." He reached out with the brush, slow and steady. The first time he tried, Ash had winced, lips twitching just slightly, not aggression, just memory. But now, after days of patience and soft words, he allowed it. Eli brushed gently along the dog's side, avoiding the ribs where the fur was patchy and the scars told stories too old to ask about. With every stroke, dust rose like a veil, lifting not just from the dog's body, but from whatever weight kept him locked in silence. "You know," Eli said after a while, his voice no louder than the wind outside, "you don't have to be a soldier anymore." Ash flicked an ear. A flick. That was all, but it was enough. Eli paused. Then he leaned back and opened the book. Its pages were yellowed, underlined in places with messy ink, old coffee stains scattered like badges. Canine command. Stand down. That's what they used to say when it was time to rest, Eli read. Bet you heard that one a lot, huh? He repeated the command aloud, not expecting a reaction. But Ash's ears twitched again, sharper this time, like a memory brushed awake. Eli's eyes widened just a little. "You remember that?" Ash didn't move, but his gaze, dull and glazed, was now trained directly on the boy. Still cautious, but present. For a creature who hadn't barked once, who hadn't wagged a tail or whimpered in response to affection, this was thunder. And so it became a ritual. Every day, before school and after supper, Eli returned to the barn. He fed Ash the same broth-soaked kibble, talked to him like he was talking to someone who mattered, not a pet, not a project, but a person in recovery. He read aloud from the K-9 book, repeated the old military commands in a voice that mimicked how his father once sounded: firm, steady, respectful. Stand down, heel, stay alert, rest easy. Ash never obeyed in the way you'd expect, but he listened, always listened. And sometimes, like when Eli said, "Stay close," while pouring water, or "Rest easy" before slipping out for school, Ash would shift just enough to place one paw near the boy's boot. Subtle, but intentional. A message not spoken but felt. One afternoon, Marla stood at the barn door, wiping her hands on her apron. She watched Eli run through the routine brush first, then food, then reading. Her face remained unreadable for a long while, but her eyes lingered on the dog. "He's getting brighter," she said eventually. Eli looked up. "I think he wants to get better. Just forgot how." Marla nodded slowly. "Some soldiers come home but never really return. Maybe he's waiting on someone to give him permission." Eli's voice softened. "Then I'll be the one." That night, as the wind stirred the pines and the stars blinked into view, Eli sat beside Ash for a long time. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His hand rested lightly on the shepherd's chest, feeling the slow, rhythmic rise and fall beneath scarred fur. Ash shifted again, laying his head on Eli's boot. Not out of need, but out of choice. And in that moment, the barn didn't feel old. The dust didn't matter. The world, with all its cruelty and indifference, stayed outside. Inside, there was just a boy, a broken soldier in fur, and a ritual of kindness being repeated like prayer. The pamphlet was thin, folded into thirds, and smelled faintly of dust and old plastic. When Eli pulled it from his backpack, he'd found it tucked away on the back shelf of the county library, Working Dogs, Commands and Bonding, wedged between a book on poultry farming and a dog-eared romance novel. The corners were frayed, and someone had drawn a smiley face inside the O in dogs. To anyone else, it was just a free flyer. To Eli, it was a bridge. That evening, after dinner and homework, he jogged across the yard with the pamphlet pressed to his chest like a sacred text. The barn door moaned open again. The now familiar sound welcomed with a soft thump Ash's tail, barely moving, but present. "You ready, partner?" Eli whispered. Ash didn't rise, but his ears perked. Just a flick. Enough. Eli crouched beside him, smoothing the rocket ship blanket and spreading the pamphlet on the ground. "Okay," he murmured, tracing the printed words with one finger. "Basic commands for military K-9S. Let's try the first one." He cleared his throat, straightened his spine the way his dad used to when giving orders, and said, firm but gentle, "Sit." Ash blinked. No response. Eli tried again, his voice a bit louder. Sit. The shepherd looked at him, eyes dark and still clouded by age and time. No movement, no defiance either, just neutrality. Eli shrugged. That's okay. Maybe your sit button's broken. He smiled, but a part of him ached not from disappointment, but from wondering what it must feel like to forget the language you once knew by heart. He glanced down at the pamphlet. Stay. The word left his mouth like a whisper, more prayer than command. Ash blinked again, this time with a subtle shift, his front paws adjusting slightly as if bracing. Eli froze. You remember that? Ash didn't move, but something in his gaze sharpened, like a ghost had stirred behind his tired eyes. And then Eli said it, the word that changed everything. Guard. The moment it left his lips, the air shifted. Ash's body twitched, then pulled itself upward, not smoothly, not powerfully, but with unmistakable purpose. Bone by bone, he rose to shaky legs, his frame trembling from age and pain, but standing. Then, in one breathless moment, Ash moved. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate, and positioned himself beside Eli's left side. Not in front, not behind, beside. Chest lifted, head level, gaze forward. Like a sentinel, like a soldier. Eli didn't breathe. His eyes were wide, mouth parted slightly, as if caught mid-word. Ash wasn't just obeying a command. He was remembering who he had been. And in that one movement, that single act of standing at his post, the barn felt different. Like it was no longer just a barn, but a place of resurrection. Eli whispered, You were trained, not just taught. He reached out slowly, brushing Ash's shoulder. The shepherd didn't flinch. He stood there, proud in his weakness, a monument to instincts buried but not erased. From the open barn door, a soft voice broke the silence. Marla Barrett stood wrapped in her evening shawl, her hair curled in loose gray wisps around her temples. She held a cup of tea in one hand, the steam curling upward like a question. She had seen everything. Her voice was quiet but sure. That's not backyard training. Eli turned to her. She took a step closer, eyes never leaving the shepherd's stance. That's embedded. Eli's voice cracked a little. What does that mean? Marla knelt beside him, her knees popping slightly. She looked at Ash, eyes filled with something between reverence and sorrow. It means he wasn't just taught tricks. He was forged, like steel, in places that change dogs forever. Eli looked back at Ash. But he still remembers. Marla nodded. That kind of training. It becomes part of who they are. Even when the world forgets them, they don't forget what they were made for. Ash shifted slightly, legs quivering but locked in place. His breath was steady, his eyes forward. Marla laid a hand gently on his shoulder. You don't have to guard anymore, she whispered. But Ash didn't move. Eli touched his chest, just above the faded scars. Maybe he's not guarding for duty. Marla looked at him. Eli said quietly, Maybe he's guarding for me. And for the first time, Ash turned his head not sharply, not quickly, but with a slow, deliberate motion and met the boy's gaze. It wasn't just acknowledgement. It was recognition. A bridge rebuilt, a command remembered, a promise remade. The water in the old metal basin steamed faintly, warmed on the stove just like Marla used to do when Eli was a baby. It sloshed gently as Eli carried it into the barn, careful not to spill. His flannel sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, and a stack of threadbare towels hung over his shoulder like a tiny medic on a mission. Ash lay curled near the wall, his ribs rising and falling in steady rhythm. The wounds from his past were healing slowly, stubbornly, but the dirt and time clung to his coat like ghosts that refused to let go. All right, soldier, Eli said gently, setting the basin down beside the blanket. Time for a field bath. Ash lifted his head, skeptical but compliant. He didn't resist as Eli dipped a sponge into the water and began to wipe the grime from his legs, the dirt caught between the toes, the caked layers along his belly. Eli worked with quiet focus, his hands small but patient. He sang under his breath a broken little melody he half remembered from lullabies. The barn creaked in approval. Somewhere outside, a hawk cried into the dusk. When Eli reached Ash's ears, he hesitated. The left one was ragged near the tip, nicked like it had seen barbed wire or teeth. Gently, Eli lifted it between his fingers, sponge ready, and then froze. There, Inside the inner fold, just above the canal, something was inked into the skin. Faint, barely visible beneath time and scarring, but it was there. A sequence of numbers. Letters. A tiny symbol shaped like a shield. Eli leaned closer, heart thudding. K, 973, AL, 4. His lips moved silently, tracing each character. He dropped the sponge. "Grandma!" His voice cracked through the evening like a stone hitting still water. Marla came faster than he expected, her shawl flapping behind her like a cape, slippers crunching the hay. "What is it, sweetie?" "Look." Eli pointed, his finger trembling. Marla knelt beside him, tucking her gray curls behind her ears as she examined Ash's ear with a precision that had once made her the most trusted vet tech in 3 counties. The moment her eyes found the tattoo, she stilled. A hush swept over the barn. Marla exhaled. "I haven't seen one of those in 20 years. Eli blinked. "So, what is it?" She looked at him, her voice softer than straw. "That's a military tattoo." "A military?" K9 unit, she explained. "Each working dog gets one. That's his ID. Means he was trained, deployed, served." The words landed like heavy snow on Eli's chest. Ash wasn't just a stray, not just an abandoned dog at a livestock auction. He had been someone. Eli sat back on his heels, staring at Ash with new eyes. The shepherd's head had dipped again, but his gaze met Eli's calm, unwavering, old as stone. A lump formed in Eli's throat. All this time, the way he responded to guard, the way he stood at attention, the way he watched every door, every window. It wasn't chance. It was memory. It was legacy. Marla ran her thumb gently over the faded code. "I bet if we looked it up," she murmured, "we could find his file, his handler, maybe even where he served." Eli's voice was small, but what if he doesn't want to remember? Marla looked at him, surprised. He reached forward, touching the edge of Ash's paw. "I just think maybe he's tired of being a soldier. Maybe he just wants to be a dog now." Ash shifted slightly, his weight pressing against Eli's hand. Marla smiled, heartbreaking a little at the sight. "You might be right on." They sat there for a long moment, a boy, a woman, and a war-worn shepherd, wrapped in the quiet knowing of something sacred. Eli finally whispered, "He's not just a rescue." "No," Marla agreed. "He's a veteran." Ash's eyes fluttered shut, not in sleep, but in surrender, not to weakness, but to something safer than orders, to being seen, to being home. The bell at Clearwater Elementary rang out like a tired metal crow, echoing across the cracked blacktop where kids spilled out for recess in noisy flocks. Laughter, sneakers, the thump of a kickball against the wall, all mixed in a dizzying blur as Eli Barrett walked alone along the edge of the fence. His shoes were scuffed, his jeans too short, and in his backpack, still zipped shut, was a library book on canine behavior that he planned to reread during lunch. He passed the tetherball pole, past the group of 5th graders huddled near the monkey bars. He didn't stop until he reached the far end of the yard, the corner with the big elm tree, and just enough shadow to disappear into, but he never got the chance. A sneaker scuffed gravel behind him. Then came the voice, sharp, smirking. "Well, if it isn't the dog freak." Eli didn't turn. Connor Blake stepped into view, his shadow falling across the dirt like a challenge. He had that same gel-slicked hair and oversized hoodie. He always wore the kind that made him look bigger than he was. 2 other boys flanked him, hungry for something to laugh at. "Heard you bought a zombie dog at the cattle auction," Connor sneered. $50 for roadkill. Solid deal." The words were knives, dull and jagged. Eli didn't flinch, but his jaw clenched. Connor leaned closer, voice dripping with mock sympathy. "You think it's going to come back to life and win medals or something?" Eli looked up slowly, his eyes calm, ancient in a way most 11-year-olds never were. "I think," he said quietly, "he already earned them." For a second, Connor's smirk faltered. But then came the shove, not hard, just enough to send Eli back a step. The laughter behind it stung more than the impact. "What's it even good for?" Connor taunted. "Bet it can't even sit without collapsing." Ellie didn't reply. He didn't need to. Because from behind the swing set, a voice cut in quiet, but clear. "You don't know anything about service dogs." And the playground stilled, just slightly. Connor turned. What? The boy who had spoken stepped forward. He was lanky, all elbows and caution, with sandy hair that curled around his ears. His hands stayed in his pockets, but his eyes sharp. Gray-blue didn't waver. My brother had one, the boy said, autistic, nonverbal. His dog stopped him from walking into traffic once. Connor blinked. The boy kept going. Didn't bark, didn't growl. Just blocked his path. That's all. That was enough. The silence stretched. Connor snorted, but it lacked conviction. Whatever. Then he turned, muttering something under his breath as he walked off his posse trailing after him, grumbling. Eli stood still. The tremor in his hand began to ease. The lanky boy shifted his weight. Sorry. I don't like him either. Eli nodded, voice soft. Thanks. I'm Quinn, the boy said. Quinn Rowe. Eli. They stood there awkwardly for a moment, the playground noise resuming around them like nothing had happened. Quinn looked at Eli's backpack. You read that training book? Eli glanced down. Yeah, twice. You think he remembers stuff? The dog, I mean. Eli smiled faintly. I think some things never leave. Quinn nodded, quiet. Then, like it cost him something, he added, My brother's dog died last year. He still talks about him like he's around. Oh. Eli's voice was barely more than a breath. Maybe he is. The bell rang again, calling them back inside. As they walked together across the yard, Eli felt something shift. Not loudly, not all at once, but in the quiet shadow of that elm tree, among the bark and dust and stung pride, a new bond had formed. Not just with Ash, but with someone who understood, someone who saw. And in a world that often didn't, that was everything. The lunchroom at Clearwater Elementary buzzed with noise, the kind of chaotic symphony only kids and square pizza could orchestrate. Trays clattered, juice boxes squirted. Conversations rose and fell in unpredictable bursts. But in the far corner, near the old vending machine that hadn't worked since spring break, Eli and Quinn sat quietly, a space carved out from the noise. Eli had a peanut butter sandwich, squashed slightly from being crammed in his pocket that morning. Quinn had only an apple and a folded napkin. Neither seemed to care. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the swirl of lunchroom life like observers rather than participants. Finally, Quinn spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. His name was Jasper. Eli looked up. My brother's dog, Quinn continued, eyes on the apple he hadn't touched. Golden retriever. Big, slow, gentle. Like he carried a secret he didn't want to burden anyone with. Eli said nothing, waiting. My brother Ezra didn't talk. Not until Jasper came. Just silence. Years of it. Then one morning, Jasper did this thing. He nudged Ezra over and over while he was having a meltdown. Didn't bark. Didn't whine. Just laid across his legs, breathing slow. Quinn's lips tightened, like holding in something warm and painful. Ezra said, Stop. First word he ever said out loud. Just like that. He paused, eyes distant. And then he wouldn't stop talking. Not to us, but to Jasper. Whispered things into his ear all the time, like they had their own world. Eli swallowed. Something in his chest ached, like a violin string, pulled too tight. What happened? He asked. Quinn's eyes flicked to the floor. Hit and run, last summer. Jasper saw Ezra dart into the road after a ball. He got there first. The words landed like bricks. Quiet, but devastating. They said it was instant, Quinn murmured. Ezra still leaves space for him on the bed. Eli didn't know what to say, so he didn't. Instead, he reached into his lunch bag and pulled out half of his squashed sandwich, holding it out silently. Quinn blinked, surprised, then took it with a small, grateful nod. They ate in silence for a minute, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled because it was already full. My dog, Eli said after a long pause. His name's Ash. I think he served. Quinn tilted his head. I found a tattoo. In his ear. My grandma said it's military. K-9 unit. He doesn't bark. Doesn't wag his tail much. But he listens. He knows things. Quinn's eyes lit with a flicker of something Eli recognized. Reverence. Sounds like Jasper, Quinn said. Eli nodded. I think he's still trying to protect something, even if no one asked him to. Quinn looked at him, really looked at him. Maybe that's the only kind of hero that matters. The words hung in the air, fragile and true. Outside the lunchroom window, the wind rustled through the maple trees, shaking loose a few yellow leaves that spiraled down like slow-falling memories. Eli felt a warmth he hadn't felt since the day he carried that coffee tin full of coins to the auction barn. Not victory, not joy, but belonging. Here was someone who didn't laugh at him, who didn't see Ash as a broken animal, who understood that some stories weren't measured in tricks or tail wags, but in the way silence could be holy, the way a gaze could be language, the way loss, when shared, became less of a hole and more of a bridge. Ezra would have liked Ash, Quinn said finally. He liked the quiet ones. Eli managed a small smile. Ash would have guarded him, I think, even now. Quinn nodded, serious. Maybe they still do. The good ones. Maybe they never really leave. The lunch bell rang, jarring them both. Kids groaned and rushed to dump their trays. The moment slipped into motion again, but it left behind something permanent. As they got up to leave, Quinn looked at Eli and said, "If you ever need help training him, or just want to talk." Eli nodded. Same. They didn't shake hands, didn't promise anything out loud, but something had passed between them in that forgotten corner, something that didn't need words or wagging tails. Just two boys, two dogs, and the kind of grief that doesn't weaken you but welds something stronger. The rain had come softly that evening, brushing the barn roof like fingertips against an old hymn. It wasn't the kind of storm that howled or threatened. It was gentler, like the sky had something to confess. Inside the barn, the light from the hanging bulb hummed low and warm. Eli sat cross-legged on the rocket ship blanket beside Ash, brushing behind his ears with slow, careful strokes. Ash no longer flinched from touch, though he rarely moved unless prompted. His body remained coiled with quiet tension, as if some piece of him never really left the battlefield. The door creaked open. Eli turned. It was Quinn, his hoodie soaked at the shoulders, eyes bright with something urgent but reverent. "I brought it," he said, lifting a weathered laptop wrapped in a towel. Eli stood, brushing hay from his jeans. "Your dad's?" Quinn nodded. "He used to work at Fort Bridger in logistics. After Jasper died, I remembered he kept an offline archive stuff they didn't fully erase before downsizing the old system. Units, records, dog registries. I thought maybe..." Eli glanced down at Ash, who blinked slowly as if he already knew. They cleared a space on an overturned feed bucket. Quinn booted up the laptop with care, hands moving like a ritual. The screen flickered, dim at first, then stabilized, the blue-gray glow cutting through the dark like moonlight on metal. "Do you remember the code?" Quinn asked, not looking away. Eli crouched and gently lifted Ash's left ear. There, just inside the fold of skin, barely visible unless caught in the right light, was a faded string of alphanumeric code. A9 K9 Cam S 70 LN 142. Eli whispered it aloud. Quinn typed, the keys soft under his fingertips. They waited. At first, nothing. Then, a blinking cursor. Then match found. Eli's heart skipped. The screen shifted. A small profile loaded. Grainy, stark, government standard. K9 Ashcroft. Breed, German Shepherd. Assigned division, U.S. Army Tactical Support. Alpha Unit. Serial ID, A9, K9, TS, 7 Taus, 8 Zils, 4 Paires. Status, missing in action. Last known deployment, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. Date of loss, May 17, 5 years prior. Handler, SSGT, Nolan Reeve, deceased. Eli's breath caught somewhere behind his ribs. It was real, not a stray, not a discarded mutt from some broken backyard. Ash had a name, a purpose, a history written in military ink and silence. Missing in action, Quinn murmured. They must have never recovered him. Or maybe no one looked, Eli said softly. On the screen was a photo. Ash, 5 years younger, sharper eyes, flawless posture, wearing a Kevlar vest with a tactical harness. His ears stood like radio towers. His gaze, even in stillness, carried a weight that made Eli feel both safe and heartbroken. "That's not just a dog," Quinn said. "That's a soldier." Eli swallowed. "And he's been carrying that alone. All this time." The barn felt smaller now, not in a cramped way, but in a sacred way, like they were standing inside a memory too heavy to lift. "He watched his handler die," Quinn whispered, reading the note beneath the file. "Probably held position, probably waited for backup that never came." Ash stirred, as if hearing that name Nolan Reeve. His eyes opened wider than they had in days. For a flicker of a second, the tension in his muscles surged like static through a wire. "Hey," Eli said gently, lowering his hand to Ash's neck. "It's okay. You're safe." Ash didn't growl, didn't bark, but he turned his head and pressed it into Eli's side, the smallest gesture of weight, like a soldier giving in to rest at long last. Eli looked up at Quinn. "We have to tell someone, right?" he asked. Quinn hesitated. "Maybe, but he's here now, with you, and if word gets out too fast." Eli understood. Papers, ownership, red tape, the kind of cold bureaucracy that didn't understand heartbeats. "Let him be a dog," Quinn added. "Not a file." Eli nodded, slowly, but something had changed. This wasn't just about rescue anymore. This was about honoring what had been lost, what had been hidden. As Quinn shut the laptop, Eli leaned down and looked Ash in the eye. "You were never a stray, were you?" he whispered. "You were waiting to be remembered." Ash blinked slowly, and for the first time since the auction, his tail moved, not a wag, exactly, but a small shift against the floorboards. A thump. Like a soldier acknowledging orders received. Outside, the rain had stopped. The night had gone quiet. Inside the barn, something had been restored, not just identity, but dignity. The kind of truth that doesn't ask for recognition, only respect. It was just past 2 a.m. when the stillness broke. The barn was wrapped in darkness, moonlight stretching through the slats like whispers across wood. Eli had fallen asleep against a hay bale, hoodie pulled over his head, one hand still resting against Ash's ribcage. The old German shepherd lay curled tightly on the rocket ship blanket, breath even, eyes closed. Until they weren't. Ash's body tensed first, a silent coiling, as if his instincts woke faster than thought. Then, like a switch being thrown in the dark, he snapped upright and let out a sharp, guttural bark. Then another, louder, urgent. Eli jolted awake, heart hammering. "Ash?" Another bark, but this time it carried something Eli had never heard from him before, not just alertness, but alarm. Ash spun toward the barn doors, nose high, ears pinned forward like radar. His claws scraped the floorboards as he growled low, commanding, unignorable. Eli scrambled to his feet, adrenaline crashing in before he was even fully conscious. "What is it, boy?" Ash didn't turn. He barked again, a sound so fierce and immediate it pierced the marrow of the night. Eli yanked open the barn doors. The air outside was thick, unnatural, and in the distance above the far tree line, maybe 2 hills over, was a glow. Orange, flickering, rising. Not sunrise, not moonlight. Fire. Eli's breath caught. He stepped forward, barefoot on cold grass. The smell hit next acrid, chemical. Smoke carried on the wind, subtle but growing. He knew that ridge, knew the property beyond it. The Anders house. "Ash," he choked out. "There." But Ash was already gone. He bounded past Eli in a blur of gray and black, legs stiff from injury but mind locked into duty. He didn't run like a dog. He moved like something trained, something precise, a soldier rediscovering his purpose. Eli took off after him, grabbing his flashlight from the fence post without stopping to think. His feet tore across grass and gravel. He ducked beneath the wire gate, heart pounding, the image of the Anders kids, Lucy and her baby brother Joel, now burning in his mind louder than the fire. They crested the rise together. And then Eli saw it. The Anders farmhouse was ablaze. Flames licked from the front porch to the second floor like greedy fingers. One window burst outward in a spray of sparks, glass raining into the grass like deadly stars. Ash stopped on the ridge, stance solid. His head turned sharply not at the fire, but at the side yard, ears twitching. Eli skidded beside him, panting. "Ash, what is it?" The answer came in the faintest sound. A scream. Small, muffled. Children. Ash launched again. Noet? But the dog didn't pause. He veered down the slope like a shadow breaking from the night. Headed not for the fire's heart, but the barn beside the Anders house half collapsed, with smoke rising from its hayloft. Eli chased him, nearly tumbling down the ridge. They reached the barn in seconds. Inside, through the smoke, Eli spotted the kids. Lucy, 10 years old, cradling baby Joel against her chest, their faces lit orange in the haze. She was trapped behind a fallen beam, frozen in place, coughing hard. "Lucy," Eli shouted, voice cracking, "stay down, I'm coming." Ash darted around the side, eyes tracking every weak point in the structure. The fire hadn't claimed the barn fully, not yet, but time was a knife pressing in. Eli crawled under the beam, ignoring the searing heat of embers at his arms. "I got you," he gasped, wrapping one hand around Lucy's shoulder. "You're gonna be okay." "Two didn't know where Mom went," Lucy cried. "Then the fire then. It's okay. You're okay. Ash found you." Ash let out a bark from the side window, not in panic, but as if directing. Eli looked up. There on the back wall was an old hay drop, maybe 5 feet up, just wide enough. "Ash," Eli whispered. Can you clear a path?" Ash turned, teeth bared in a snarl, and lunged at the weakened frame with his full body weight. The wall cracked, splintered, then collapsed. Cold air rushed in, mixing with smoke. Eli lifted Joel into his arms, then helped Lucy crawl through the gap. Ash darted ahead, checking every angle, every scent, watching their backs like a guardian from some war long ago. They emerged into the field, just as sirens howled in the distance. Volunteer engines coming up Route 9, their red lights blinking like stars through tears. Eli fell to his knees, Joel still clutched to his chest. Lucy wrapped her arms around her baby brother and sobbed into his shirt. Ash sat beside them, smoke-blackened and shaking, but upright, watching, waiting, alive. Marla arrived moments later in her robe and boots, hair still in curlers, breathless. "Dear God," she whispered, dropping beside Eli and wrapping the children in her arms. "How did you?" Eli just turned to Ash. "He woke me," he said, voice thin. Marla stared. "That's the first time he's barked, isn't it?" Eli nodded. And in that moment, surrounded by firelight, smoke, and the miracle of breath, still held something past between them all. Ash wasn't broken. He was still reporting for duty. They didn't stop running. Ash barreled ahead, his legs no longer burdened by memory or pain, just purpose. And Eli, breath catching in his throat, chased after him with every ounce of will left in his body. The Anders house blazed like a fallen sun. Timbers cracked and glass hissed as it shattered. The porch had already collapsed inward, and the flames had begun to chew through the second story like paper. A cluster of neighbors stood near the roadside. In a stunned half-circle, no one dared get closer. The fire engines hadn't arrived yet. And in the chaos, Eli spotted Mrs. Anders barefoot, soot-streaked, screaming hoarsely into the night. "Miles!" she wailed, clutching her husband's arm as he tried to hold her back. "He's still in there! He didn't come out!" Eli froze. His brain went blank. Then, white-hot, with one word: Miles. The Anders' 12-year-old boy. Quiet. Kept to himself. Always wore that red hoodie with the dinosaur patch. Still inside, Ash didn't hesitate. He veered off the path, cut straight through the side yard, and lunged toward the front of the burning house. Smoke poured from the doorway like something alive. The heat hit Eli like a slap. "Ash, no, wait." But Ash didn't slow. He plunged into the flames. The world narrowed. Time seemed to cinch around Eli's ribs. He couldn't breathe. Ash, the dog who wouldn't even respond to his name 2 weeks ago, had just disappeared into an inferno and taken every ounce of fear with him. Mrs. Anders dropped to her knees, sobbing. "My baby, he's in his room, second hallway, on the left. I told him to run. He must have frozen. Oh, God! Oh, God!" Eli stepped forward. His hands shook. Should he go in? He looked at the doorway, black smoke pulsing like a heartbeat, flames licking the edges of the walls. He wouldn't make it 5 feet. Then a sound. Faint, rough, muffled by heat and panic. A bark. Eli's eyes locked on the doorway. Another bark shorter, urgent, then silence. He took 2 steps closer, heart slamming. Suddenly, a figure burst from the smoke. Not walking, dragging. Ash emerged, his coat scorched and singed, eyes wild with focus. In his jaws, clutched gently by the sleeve, was a small boy coughing, limp, barely upright. Miles. Eli's legs collapsed, and he dropped to his knees in the grass just as Ash reached them. The boy slipped from Ash's jaws and fell into Eli's arms, hacking violently, his face streaked with soot. "He got me," Miles croaked, barely audible. "He pulled me out." Mrs. Anders screamed his name again, this time in relief, and ran to him, cradling her son as if he might vanish again. Ash collapsed beside them, ribs heaving. His legs trembled violently, but his eyes stayed open, still watching, still guarding. Eli pressed his hand to the dog's neck. His fur was hot, too hot, and his breathing came in sharp, rattling bursts. "You're okay, buddy," Eli whispered, voice breaking. "You did it. You did it." The fire truck screamed in from the highway, red lights slicing through the smoke. Firefighters charged in, axes and hoses ready. But they weren't the heroes anymore. That title had already been claimed. Half an hour later, as paramedics loaded Miles onto a stretcher and the worst of the flames were beaten back, Eli sat with Ash in the open bed of a pickup truck, a wet towel draped gently over the dog's back. His head rested on Eli's lap. The crowd had quieted. Whispers passed between neighbors like holy rumor. "That's the same dog from the shelter, right?" He ran into the fire, pulled the kid out himself. "I've never seen anything like it." "Mrs." Anders approached slowly, eyes red, holding her son's inhaler in one hand and a blanket in the other. Her face was wrecked with tears and ash. "Is he okay?" she asked softly, nodding toward Ash. Eli looked down at the old shepherd. His chest rose slowly. The soot made his fur look darker, older, but his eyes, they were clear, alert. "I think he will be," Eli said. She reached forward, hand trembling, and brushed her fingers over Ash's head. "Thank you," she whispered. And for the first time, Ash didn't flinch. He let her touch him. A moment later, he closed his eyes, but his tail moved. Just once. A faint thump of something not yet gone. By sunrise, the story had already spread. First, through whispered texts between sleepless neighbors. Then across back porches, breakfast counters, and cracked sidewalks. By mid-morning, it reached the corner store, the principal's office, the volunteer firehouse. The details changed with each telling. Some said the dog leapt through a second-story window. Others swore he dragged the boy through flames taller than trucks. But one thing never changed. That old broken dog saved a life. Ash lay curled on a thick towel inside Clearwater Veterinary Clinic. His paws were bandaged in soft white gauze, the pads raw but intact. One of his ears was singed at the tip. The vet had gently shaved away some scorched fur to clean the burns, leaving a patchy, vulnerable look. But his eyes, they were still sharp, still watching. Eli sat on the cold linoleum floor beside the exam table, legs crossed, hoodie zipped tight. He hadn't said much since the fire, just stayed with Ash, holding the edge of the towel, watching the slow rise and fall of the dog's chest like it was a fragile flame. Marla sat nearby, arms folded across her coat, her reading glasses hanging loosely around her neck. She'd been the one to insist on rushing him in. No delay. The fireman had offered a ride, but she'd driven herself, muttering the whole way like it was a prayer she refused to say out loud. Now, the room was quiet except for the rhythmic beep of the wall clock and the distant hum of the reception desk. Ash stirred, his head tilted just slightly. Eli leaned forward, lips trembling, then steadied his breath. "You knew what to do, didn't you?" he whispered. "You remembered." Ash blinked, and that was enough. Eli reached up, touching the dog's neck gently, like honoring something sacred. "I don't care what they say. You're not broken." He paused, swallowed. "You're still a soldier." The clinic door opened with a soft chime. Eli didn't turn around, but he heard the shuffle of boots, the murmured voices, the intake of breath when someone recognized Ash. From behind, a man whispered, "That's him." Another voice, softer, female. "He's just lying there? Like nothing happened?" Then came footsteps. Careful, hesitant. A boy's voice. "Is it true?" He really went in? Eli turned then. It was Quinn standing at the edge of the doorway, eyes wide beneath his beanie. Behind him were two firemen in uniform, and a woman holding a disposable coffee cup with both hands, knuckles white from cold or awe, maybe both. Eli gave a single nod. "Yeah," he said. "It's true." Someone knelt beside him. A fireman, the taller one. "You should know," the man said, voice low. "The kid's gonna be okay. Smoke inhalation, but your dog." He pulled him out just in time. Eli glanced at Ash, who hadn't moved. His tail thumped once against the towel, as if to acknowledge the statement without ceremony. The fireman reached forward and placed something next to Eli on the ground. It was a patch, scorched and slightly melted at the edges, but still legible. A military insignia. "Took this off the kid's hoodie," the man explained. "Guess the dog grabbed onto the sleeve right where this was. Thought maybe it meant something." Eli picked it up. The heat had warped the fabric, but the symbol remained. A silver star wrapped in wings. Quinn stepped closer, looking between Ash and the patch. Then, barely above a whisper, "My brother's service dog. He used to sit like that. Straight spine, ears alert. He'd guard the hospital room like it was a war zone." Eli didn't answer. He just looked down at Ash again. "You remembered what to do," he said softly, repeating the words like a promise this time. And this time, Ash didn't just blink. He closed his eyes. But not in pain, in peace. Outside the clinic, the town of Clearwater seemed different. Not louder, not busier, just awake. As if something had stirred beneath its sidewalks, something old and good and long asleep. A child had been saved by a dog no one believed in, and that changed everything. The sign on the veterinary clinic's front lawn, usually used for spay, neuter specials, and flea treatment reminders, had been hastily updated with stick-on black letters, "Thank you, Ash," and under it, in a smaller row, "Clearwater's Own." The banners went up before noon. 2 lines of hand-painted signs stretched from the firehouse to the community center, reading "Hometown Hero" and "Thank you, Ash," some with paw prints drawn in glitter, others with clumsy block letters traced by school children. The town hadn't held a public gathering this big since the 4th of July picnic 5 years back. But today wasn't about fireworks or funnel cake. Today was about a dog. A dog who ran into fire. A dog who came out carrying someone else's son. Eli stood on the makeshift stage in front of Clearwater's town hall, one hand resting lightly on Ash's back. The German shepherd sat stoic beside him, paws still wrapped in soft white gauze, but posture-proud tail curled neatly, ears up, chest lifted. It was as if the bandages didn't belong to a wounded dog at all, but to a soldier who'd earned them. Mayor Dorsey was mid-speech, voice booming through a squeaky microphone, using words like courage and selfless, and the spirit of Clearwater lives on. But Eli barely heard her. His eyes drifted across the crowd, scanning rows of neighbors and strangers. There was Quinn near the front, smiling wide beneath his beanie. Marla stood to the side in a worn cardigan, clutching a tissue she hadn't used yet. Even Connor Blake was there, arms crossed, face unreadable. Then Eli saw him, half a block back, leaning against the oak tree by the memorial benches, just beyond the reach of the event's sound system. A man, alone. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't talking. He wasn't even holding a phone like most people were. He was just watching. A weathered military coat hung from his shoulders, desert tan, with faded patches near the elbows. His posture was straight, but not stiff. His eyes were hidden beneath the shadow of a ball cap. Yet Eli felt them, not just looking, recognizing. Ash shifted. Not much, just a glance. A subtle lean, but it was enough for Eli to follow the line of the dog's gaze. It landed right on the man. They saw each other, and something passed between them, a flicker of something old and quiet and unspoken. After the ceremony ended, after the handshakes and photos and awkward pats on Ash's head, Eli slipped away from the crowd. He moved down the sidewalk, weaving through leftover lawn chairs and trampled flags until he reached the oak tree. But the man was gone. Just a scuffed spot in the dirt where his boots had been. Eli stood still, unsure what he even meant to say if he'd caught up. Behind him, Ash let out a soft exhale, not quite a whine, but something close. That night, Eli lay awake on top of his blanket, fully dressed. The barn window glowed pale from the porch light, and the wind stirred the hay in gentle hushes. He couldn't shake the image of the man. It wasn't just the coat, or the silence. It was the way he looked at Ash. Like he knew him. Not the new him, not the dog who barked at fire and slept beside a 13-year-old. The before. Eli rolled over, reaching instinctively to Ash's side. The dog was already awake, eyes open, staring at the rafters. "You saw him too, didn't you?" Eli whispered. Ash didn't move, didn't blink, but his tail thumped once against the barn floor. 2 days later, Marla showed up with a photograph. It was grainy and slightly out of focus, snapped by a volunteer fireman during the ceremony. The man in the coat was in the background, near the tree. Eli stared at it. His pulse ticked faster. "Do you know who he is?" he asked. Marla adjusted her glasses, squinting at the picture. But I'll tell you this. He wasn't just wandering by. Look at his feet. Stance like that? That's military." Eli stared harder. The way the man stood, the angle of his shoulders, the tension in his hands. Marla nodded toward Ash. "And look at him. That dog wasn't just sitting. He was waiting, like he knew that man might come closer." Eli's breath caught in his throat. "Maybe he didn't come for the town," he whispered. Marla tilted her head. "Then who?" Eli lowered the photo, meeting Ash's steady eyes. "For him," he said. The knock came just after sunrise. Not the hurried, nervous kind. Not fists pounding with urgency. It was soft, deliberate. 2 slow raps on the screen door, like someone asking permission to remember something they'd buried. Eli had barely slept. He shuffled toward the front of the barnhouse, socked feet on old wood, Ash pacing behind him like a silent echo. The dog had been restless all night, ears twitching, eyes trained on shadows only he could see. Eli opened the door. The man from the crowd stood there, no longer at a distance, no longer in hiding. Closer, the years showed. Streaks of gray in his beard, creases that hadn't been there when whatever war he'd been in had first started. His military coat was folded over one arm. He wore a flannel shirt now, one button missing. But his eyes looked like they remembered everything. "I'm Gabe," the man said quietly. "Gabe Mercer." His voice was gravel and wind, the kind that comes from giving too many orders in storms no one could see. Eli nodded, heart already drumming in his chest. He opened the door wider without thinking. "You came for him." Gabe's gaze dropped. To Ash. The dog stood in the doorway, frozen legs stiff, head low, ears pinned slightly back. Not in fear, in something far deeper. Recognition. Not immediate, not sudden, but slow, like watching dawn crawl across a battlefield after too many nights in the dark. "I wasn't sure," Gabe murmured, his voice almost breaking. "I heard a story on the radio. Old dog runs into fire. I didn't believe it, couldn't. Not after they told me he was gone." Ash took a step forward. Then another. Gabe sank to one knee, very slowly, carefully, as if approaching something holy. His hand trembled as he reached out, not touching, not yet, just offering. "His name wasn't Ash," he whispered. "It was Shadow. He was mine." For a beat, nothing moved. Then Ash shuddered. A low sound escaped him, somewhere between a whine and a breath that had been held for 5 years. He stepped closer, and then, without a sound, collapsed into Gabe's chest. Not in weakness, but surrender. As if the weight he'd carried had finally found a place to rest. Gabe wrapped both arms around the dog's neck, pressing his forehead to the fur between his ears. His shoulders shook silently, powerfully. And Eli, standing in the doorway, felt something shift in the air, like time had just been pulled back into place. Minutes passed. Neither spoke. Ash remained, still head buried in Gabe's chest, tail curled around the man's knee. His body trembled, but not from pain. From release. From remembering. Finally, Gabe looked up at Eli, voice hoarse. "He was in my unit. Tactical K-9. Forward recon. We were in Kandahar, ambushed on a supply run. There was an explosion. I was medevaxed out. They said no one found him." Eli swallowed hard. "He showed up in a drainage canal outside town. No tags, no name, just scars and silence." Gabe nodded. "He wasn't just a tracker. He was my partner, my reason to come home." He looked back at Ash, now resting his muzzle in Gabe's lap. Eyes half closed. Safe in a way Eli had never seen. I searched, Gabe continued. Filed reports. Begged for files they wouldn't unseal. And when nothing came, I thought... He stopped. Ash licked his hand once, slow and deliberate, like a seal. I thought I'd lost him, Gabe whispered. Eli sat down on the porch step. The wind moved through the pine trees. A jay called somewhere in the distance. For a long while, no one spoke. Then, he saved a boy from a fire, Eli said softly. Ran straight in, dragged him out by his sleeve. Gabe didn't look surprised. He stroked Ash's head with the back of his hand. Voice almost inaudible. That's who he is. Eventually, the sky turned amber with morning. Gabe rose, gently coaxing Ash to his feet. The dog stood slower now, stiff in the back legs, still bandaged, but present in a way Eli had never seen. Not just alive. Home. Do you want to take him back? Eli asked quietly, heart sinking before he even finished the sentence. Gabe paused, looked down at Ash, then up at Eli, and smiled, eyes wet. I think he's already home, he said. The kettle hissed softly on the old stove, steam curling into morning light as if afraid to break the silence. They sat at the kitchen table, Eli, Gabe, and the dog between them. The air still held the scent of wood smoke and river clay from Ash's last bath. Faint beneath the warmth of cinnamon toast and boiled coffee, Shadow, his name was Shadow, now lay curled under the table, one paw bandaged, the other twitching occasionally, as if chasing dreams that never left him. Gabe's hands were folded tight around a chipped mug, knuckles white, eyes distant. It was Eli who broke the quiet. What happened? Gabe looked up, and for a moment, Eli saw the soldier beneath the layers. Not just the coat, not just the scars, but the kind of man who remembered everything, even the parts too heavy to speak. We were 3 months into rotation, Gabe began. His voice had a rhythm to it, like footsteps on desert gravel. Kandahar province. Routine recon, mostly. I was in charge of a 4-man team, and Shadow back then. He was K9 to 214. Tactical support. He glanced down at the dog, a faint smile flickering. He hated that name. Wouldn't respond to it unless I whispered it like a joke. Shadow let out a low sigh in his sleep, as if remembering the same joke. Gabe continued. We were sweeping a supply route, just past midnight, quiet enough to hear your own pulse. Shadow halted at a bend, something about the air. I didn't question it. He paused, fingers tracing a circle on the rim of his mug. Turns out he'd picked up nitro scent. The IED was buried deep, pressure triggered. He led us around. It saved all of us. Eli leaned forward, caught in the quiet gravity of the story. But, Gabe said, his voice thickening, the ambush came 2 clicks later. Snipers. 3 angles. They were waiting for us to avoid the bomb. Like they knew our route. He stared out the window now, not seeing the trees. I took a round in the leg and shoulder, saw 2 of my men go down. Shadow dragged me behind a supply truck, teeth in my vest. I couldn't move, couldn't fight back. I remember blood pooling on gravel. The smell of fuel. He blinked hard, jaw locked. Last thing I saw was him charging into smoke. Gunfire everywhere. Then, silence filled the space like dust. They evased me. Said Shadow didn't make it out. Nobody. Just disappeared. Eli's throat tightened. He looked down at the dog at their feet. So still, but somehow more there than ever. I filed every report I could, Gabe continued. Called every handler, every rescue group. I even checked black market trackers. A bitter chuckle escaped him. Do you know how it feels to survive because someone died for you, then not even be able to say goodbye? Eli didn't answer. He didn't have to. The answer lay sleeping at their feet. After a long moment, Gabe's voice softened. I thought I was the last piece of his story. He looked at Eli. But I was wrong. The boy's voice came small, but steady. Do you want him back? It was the question that had hung between them since the front porch. The one Eli had carried in his chest like a stone since last night. Because he'd seen it the way Shadow's body had gone still in Gabe's arms. Not tense, not afraid, just finished. Like a soldier standing at attention after years of wandering. Gabe didn't answer right away. He reached down instead, gently resting his palm on the dog's neck. Shadow stirred, eyes blinking open. He looked up first at Gabe, then at Eli, and wagged his tail once. Just once. Gabe exhaled slowly, then met Eli's gaze. "No," he said softly. "He's already home." Eli's eyes burned, but he didn't blink them away. Shadow pressed his head against Gabe's leg for a moment longer, then stood, limped over to Eli's side, and sat. Tail curled beside the boy's ankle. Gabe watched, something in his posture loosening. "I think," he said, smiling gently, "he found where he was needed." They finished breakfast in silence, but it wasn't empty. It was the silence of things understood, of stories no longer lost, of a dog who had remembered his mission not from command, but from instinct, from something deeper, from love. The idea began not with a speech, but with a silence. The kind of silence that settles in the heart after something sacred has been shared, like when someone finally tells you the truth they've carried for years, and you realize it changed them. And now, it's changing you. Eli sat on the porch that evening, watching the wind stir the grass. Shadow no longer just ash lay at his side, his paws wrapped in gauze, his eyes calmer than they'd ever been. Every so often he'd lift his head, nose twitching toward the edge of the yard, like he could still hear echoes from the fire. Eli glanced down at him. "You didn't just save Miles," he said softly. "You reminded everyone who you are, who dogs like you are." He paused. "I think people forget, or maybe they never knew." Shadow thumped his tail once, like a quiet agreement. And just like that, the idea landed. The next morning, Eli stood in front of his classroom with a paper in his trembling hand. Mrs. Caldwell raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. Eli rarely spoke in front of others. Most days, he barely raised his hand, but today, he stepped forward. "I'd like to do a project," he said. "Not just for school. For real." The classroom went still. Even Connor Blake stopped drumming his pencil. "It's for dogs," Eli added quickly. "The ones that serve in the military, or rescue people. And then they come home, and people forget." He swallowed. "I want to raise money for them, for their care. And maybe," his voice grew stronger, "have a celebration day, a fundraiser, so they're remembered, like they deserve." Silence. Then, Mrs. Caldwell's eyes softened. "That sounds like something worth doing." At lunch, Quinn was already drawing plans on a napkin. He'd added silent auction, photo booth, and canine story tent in bubble letters. "You could make a poster about Shadow's rescue," he said, chewing his sandwich. "People love stories with heart." Marla plopped down across from them with her lunch tray, pushing her curls behind one ear. "My cousin works at the vet clinic," she said. "They might help sponsor. Also, I make mean snickerdoodles, just saying." Quinn grinned. "Food table check." Eli blinked at them. "You guys really want to do this?" Quinn didn't hesitate. "Of course. It's not just for Shadow. It's for Jasper. For all of them." Marla nodded. "And for you. You're different now. You believe in something." Eli didn't know what to say, so he just smiled, small and real. By the end of the week, they had a name, Paws of Honor, a day for the dogs who gave everything. Quinn designed the flyers. Eli walked door to door with Shadow, gently explaining their cause to neighbors who'd only ever seen him as the quiet boy with the weird dog. Now, those same neighbors handed him $5 bills and old folding tables, saying things like, "God bless him for what he did," and "My brother had a dog in Iraq, too." Even Connor Blake's mom dropped off cupcakes. "Connor doesn't get it," she said quietly, looking down. "But maybe this will help." Mrs. Caldwell surprised them all by offering the school gym. "We'll cancel Friday's assembly," she said with a wink. "I think your idea matters more." Oh, and when they hesitated about sound systems and seating charts, the quietest person in the room spoke up. Mr. Fenwick, the soft-spoken science teacher with the two big glasses. "My sister was a canine medic," he said, almost whispering. "I'll run logistics." It was like the town had been waiting for something to gather around, something pure, something good. And Eli? Eli had never felt this before. He'd always thought bravery looked like shouting, or stepping in front of bullets, or running into fires. But now, he was beginning to understand it could also look like planning bake sales and folding chairs, like standing up with a poster in your hand and saying, "They matter," even when your voice shook. Especially when your voice shook. One night, a few days before the big event, Eli sat cross-legged in his bedroom with Shadow's head resting in his lap. He held a stack of photos Gabe had mailed them from his time overseas. One showed Shadow, years younger, standing tall beside a row of soldiers. Another captured him mid-leap, ears back, jaws open, dust flying. And then the one that made Eli stop. Shadow lying beside Gabe, nose against his knee, eyes closed, not asleep, but trusting. Eli swallowed hard. "You were always brave, huh?" he whispered, even when no one saw it. Shadow didn't move, but his tail gave a single soft sweep. Eli pressed his forehead to the dog's. I think I want to be like you." Outside, the wind picked up. But inside, the boy and the dog stayed where they were, hearts steady, a plan in motion. Tomorrow, the gym would fill with faces and lights and stories. But tonight, it began here. With one boy, one dog, and a promise to remember. The gym smelled of lemon polish and dog biscuits. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching flecks of dust in the air, turning them gold. Folding chairs lined the edges of the basketball court, now covered in thick rugs and mats where dogs lounged, young, old, wounded, whole, some with graying muzzles and cloudy eyes. Others still bright and eager, tails wagging like metronomes of hope. Outside, the hand-painted banner snapped in the spring wind. Paws of honor, because some heroes have 4 legs. The first to arrive was Mrs. Nilsson, with her retriever mix, Lucky, who'd once pulled her out of a frozen pond. She placed a jar of homemade peach preserves on the donation table and patted Eli's shoulder. "I didn't think anyone remembered him anymore," she said softly. Eli smiled. "We do now." Within an hour, the place was full. Retired police dogs dozed beside toddlers. A teenager with autism read aloud to a therapy dog named Bella in the quiet corner tent. Firemen brought their off-duty search and rescue hounds, each wearing bright red scarves and signs that read, "Ask me what I've found." Marla stood beside the story tent, a canvas-covered booth decorated with paw prints and paper lanterns, telling soft-spoken tales to a ring of cross-legged children. "This one," she said, lifting a laminated photo, "is Scout. He once pulled a girl out of a house fire, even after his own fur caught flame. He didn't stop until he heard her breathing. A girl with a pink cast hugged her knees. Did he get scared?" Marla's smile didn't waver. "Probably. But being scared doesn't stop the good ones. It reminds them why they have to move faster." Gabe arrived near noon. Not in uniform, not today. Just a flannel shirt, jeans, and a presence that seemed to hum with memory. Under one arm, he carried a wooden box, polished, worn at the edges, like it had been opened and closed too many times. Inside were Shadow's medals. 5 of them. Eli stared as Gabe lifted the lid and placed the case at the center table beside the tribute wall. One medal had teeth marks across the edge. Another was stained faintly, as if it had once been buried in the dirt and then pulled out with care. "They tried to send these to me years ago," Gabe explained, his voice gravel, soft. "I couldn't open the package back then. Too much hurt, too much missing." He looked over at Shadow, who lay near the back of the room beside a boy in a wheelchair, gently allowing his paw to be held. "But now I see," Gabe said, mostly to himself. He didn't vanish. He just finished his mission somewhere else. At the donation table, a man in his 70s dropped off a check and whispered, "For Daisy. She saved me after I lost my son. I never said it out loud, but she's the only reason I'm still here." Nearby, a chalkboard let people write names in white letters. In honor of... By noon, it was full. Rex, Honey, Sergeant Bruno, Mika, Finder of Lost Things, Ash, now Shadow, still my partner, even if I can't touch you anymore. Eli stared at those names like they were holy scripture. And in a way, they were. Quinn's photo booth became a surprise hit. He snapped Polaroids of kids with dogs and sunglasses, of veterans kneeling beside their old partners, of moms who cried while holding framed pictures of animals long gone. Each picture was pinned on a string across the stage. By the time Eli stepped back to take it all in, the gym didn't look like a gym. It looked like a chapel. A chapel built not from stained glass and stone, but from fur, photos, whispered names, and the soft weight of loyalty. Mid-afternoon, someone started singing. It was soft at first, a woman in the back row, a retired schoolteacher who once trained service dogs. Her voice cracked, but the melody was familiar. Others joined in. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound. Eli stood frozen beside Shadow. Gabe placed a hand on his shoulder, and slowly, Eli sang too. His voice shook. He'd never sung in public, not once. But it didn't matter here, because the tears falling around him weren't for sadness alone. They were for recognition. For all the fur-covered memories that never got parades or medals or newspaper obituaries. Until now. At the end of the day, Eli knelt by the donation jar. It was full dollar bills folded over quarters and dog tags someone had left behind, along with a note that read simply, "For the ones who loved us first and never stopped." Shadow lay at his side, his head resting on Gabe's boot. The dog's breathing was slow, steady, like he'd finally found his rhythm after years of marching out of step with the world. Marla handed Eli a framed poster. On it were drawings the kids had made, scribbled hearts, big floppy ears, and stick figures hugging their dogs. At the top, in bold crayon, heroes come in all shapes. Some even bark. Eli held it close, and for the first time since his mom left, he didn't feel like a boy holding things together. He felt like someone who had built something worth keeping. The mic squeaked. Eli winced. His sneakers scuffed against the wooden riser someone had called a stage, though it was just a few stacked pallets with a red tablecloth draped over. Behind him hung the banner Quinn had designed, "For those who never gave up." Ash sat beside him, wearing a dark blue bandana around his neck, a white patch, stitched by Marla's careful hands. Hero. The dog didn't flinch, didn't fidget, just watched. Watched Eli the way he always did, as if there were no one else in the room. The gym had fallen quiet. Over 100 people sat shoulder to shoulder on folding chairs, in bleachers, on gym mats. Veterans, kids, teachers, strangers holding coffee cups they hadn't touched in 20 minutes. All eyes on the boy with a page of trembling notes in his hand. Eli looked down. Then he looked at Ash and folded the paper in half. He didn't need it. "I don't know how speeches usually go," Eli began, voice soft, cracking once. "But this isn't really about speeches." He took a deep breath, let the silence hang. His fingers found the edge of Ash's ear, brushing it gently, as if for courage. "It's about second chances, or maybe third ones. It's about the things we think are broken just because someone gave up on them too soon." His eyes scanned the crowd. Someone was already crying. Marla. Maybe. Or the older man who'd spoken earlier about Daisy. "I used to think heroes had to be shiny, like the ones in movies. Like soldiers who never flinch, dogs who always obey, or people who never mess up." He paused. "But I live with someone who limps on cold mornings, who has a jagged scar down his side, and bad dreams that make him whimper in the dark." A long inhale. "And I've seen that same someone run into fire, real fire, without waiting, without asking, just because he knew someone needed him." Ash blinked slowly, shifting just enough to lean into Eli's leg. Eli's voice dropped, steadied. "They called him broken, said he was too old, too damaged, too hard to train." But he remembered. Somehow, he remembered what it meant to be brave. "Oh." He looked out again. Every face was still. "Some people think animals can't feel what we feel, that they just obey. But I know, that they choose. Every day." His hand reached down to Ash's collar, tugging gently. And this one, he chose to stay, when he didn't have to. A hush settled like fog. "I guess what I'm trying to say is..." Eli faltered, then smiled. Not a nervous smile, but the kind that comes from someplace real. If someone tells you something's worthless because it's not perfect anymore, they're probably wrong. He pointed gently toward the metal case Gabe had sat beneath the memorial wall. "Some of the strongest things in the world don't shine. They limp. They flinch at loud noises. They sleep with one eye open. And still, They protect us. Oppose it. Still, they save us. He looked down again. Ash was still watching him, ears forward, posture straight. The boy's voice broke just slightly. His name used to be Shadow. Before I met him, he belonged to someone else. Someone brave, someone good. He met Gabe's eyes across the room. But I don't think heroes ever belong to just one person. They belong to whoever needs them most. Eli stepped back slightly, allowing the crowd to see Ash fully. And I needed him. The silence didn't last this time. It cracked open like spring thunder. A single clap from the back row. Then another. Then all at once people rising, chairs scraping, hands coming together in waves. 100 voices rising in ovation. Not loud or frantic, but steady, deep, like a heartbeat. Ash didn't move. He stood tall, steady beside the boy, as if absorbing the weight of the sound, not for himself, but for all the dogs who had never heard it. Afterward, someone brought Eli flowers, wild flowers, bundled in a paper cup. Someone else handed Ash a dog biscuit shaped like a star. The mayor wiped her cheeks and said something about honoring more animals next year, and maybe renaming the park trail after Shadow. But none of it felt bigger than what had just happened. Because in that small gym, on that makeshift stage, a boy had found his voice, and a broken dog had found his applause. That night, when the last chair was folded and the banner taken down, Eli sat on the gym steps beside Shadow. The dog's eyes were half-lidded, tired, but peaceful. "I didn't think I could do it," Eli whispered, brushing his hand along the bandana. "But you just sat there like you already knew I could." Ash gave a quiet grunt, leaned in, and rested his chin on Eli's knee. They didn't need words after that. Just the hush of a tired town, the creak of the old gym doors, and a hero's breath, steady, quiet, and home. The gym still smelled faintly of kettle corn and dog shampoo when Eli and Shadow slipped out the side door, leaving the last of the cleanup crew behind. Stars scattered above Clearwater like silver shavings. The moon hung low and yellow, a lantern over field and farmhouse. Shadow limped, a little bandaged paws sore after a long day on polished floors, but the old shepherd's head remained high, ears tilting to every night sound. Eli kept pace, one hand resting on the dog's shoulder as if afraid the moment might drift away with the wind. Porch light glowed warm in the distance. Marla waited there, rocking gently in the cedar chair her husband once carved. The chair creaked with each rise and fall, its sound blending with cricket song and the soft sigh of June grass. As they drew closer, Eli noticed something in her lap. A narrow wooden box, aged to the color of tobacco leaves, corners burnished smooth by decades of touch. Marla's fingers traced the grain as though reacquainting herself with a friend. "You two look like you carried the whole town on your backs," she murmured when they reached the steps. Eli gave a shy smile. "Maybe just its heart. Same thing." She pushed to her feet joints, popping softly, then nodded toward the swing. "Sit with me a minute, will you?" Eli lowered himself onto the porch swing. Shadow settled at his feet, stretching out with a low grunt. Moonlight silvered the tufts of gray along his muzzle, softening the scars into quiet history. Marla held the box out. "Been meaning to give you this." The wood was cool beneath Eli's fingertips. He lifted the lid. Inside lay a leather collar-deep chestnut, the buckle dulled to pewter, the surface etched with faint but careful tooling. Oak leaves along the band, a tiny cross stitched into the keeper loop. The leather had softened over time, but it still held its shape, as if waiting for another neck, another story. Ellie's voice came hushed. "It's beautiful. Your grandpa thought so too." Marla's gaze slipped past him, to a memory only she could see. "Wore it on every dog he trained first day of service. Said it reminded him purpose was bigger than the uniform." She drew a breath. "When he passed, I packed it away. Couldn't bring myself to use it again until now." She reached, brushing Shadow's ear. The shepherd blinked, turning calm amber eyes on her. In that look, she found what she'd been hoping for. Recognition not of her, but of something shared, an unspoken salute from one seasoned soul to another. "He would have liked this old dog," she said, voice catching just a little. "Lord knows he loved the stubborn ones." Eli swallowed the lump in his throat. "Are you sure?" "Positive." Marla closed his fingers around the collar. "Legacy isn't meant for closets. It's meant for shoulders and necks. They can carry it forward." Gently, Eli slid from the swing and knelt beside Shadow. The buckle clicked as he opened it. The leather smelled faintly of saddle soap and cedar chest. He slipped it over Shadow's head, careful of the bandages, settling the strap against thick fur. It fit as though measured for him. Shadow shook once testing weight, listening to the soft jingle of the old brass D-ring, then grew still. His posture lifted, subtle yet unmistakable. The quiet pride of a soldier accepting insignia. Eli stroked beneath the collar, fingertips finding grooves where Marla's husband's initials had been pressed long ago. JLB. Thank you, Eli whispered to Marla, to the night, to the man he'd never meet yet suddenly felt near. Marla touched his shoulder. No, sweetheart. Thank you for reminding me that service doesn't end it, just changes hands. They sat in companionable silence, the porch swing swaying like a lullaby. Fireflies drifted between blades of grass. Somewhere beyond the barn, frogs began their chorus. Eli glanced at Shadow. The moon reflected in the dog's eyes, bright as a far-off flare. Feels like he's wearing history. He is, Marla said. But don't let it weigh him down. Let it tell him he's home. Shadow laid his head on Eli's shoe, exhaling a breath that sounded almost like contentment. The collar glinted softly each time the swing creaked, oak leaf tooling catching silver starlight. It was as though two Aerosone forged in distant wars. The other in the heart fire of a small town had clasped hands around the shepherd's neck. Eli leaned back, letting the swing's rhythm match his pulse. He pictured his grandfather on some training field decades ago, whistling commands to a young dog with eyes like shadows, believing that every scar carried a story and every story deserved to be carried onward. Maybe courage was hereditary. Maybe it traveled in leather and lineage and the quiet choices people made when no one cheered. Eli smiled into the night. We'll take good care of it, he murmured, unsure if he spoke to Marla, Shadow, or the echo of a man who'd once worn the same uniform Gabe had. Beside him, Marla rocked again, her silhouette framed by warm porch light. I know you will, she said, because that collar's never really been mine to keep. It was only waiting for the next good heart. The wind picked up then, gentle but insistent, lifting the banner still tied to the fence down the lane. Its fabric fluttered in moonlit ripples until the words hero and owner almost seemed to breathe. And under the hush of that wind, boy and dog sat wrapped in legacy and old collar, a new purpose, and a promise that would outlast them both. A late summer chill rolled down from the timberline, nudging the Barretts indoors. By dusk, an oak log fire crackled in the living room hearth, painting honey-colored loops across worn floorboards and the framed snapshots that lined the mantel. Eli at 3 with a toy tractor, Marla in her wedding dress, a smiling man in flannel holding a 2-day-old newborn Daniel Barrett, gone now 4 years. Eli sat cross-legged on the braided rug, Shadow stretched beside him. The leather collar Marla had gifted shimmered when sparks leapt up the chimney. Across from them, Sarah Ellie's mother lowered herself into the rocker, brushing sawdust from her jeans after a double shift at the Mills office. Gabe took the wooden chair near the window, nursing a mug of tea that smelled faintly of mint and smoke. For a few minutes, no one spoke. They just listened to the hush of logs settling and the soft click of Shadow's claws as he resituated himself, keeping all 4 humans within his relaxed but watchful gaze. Eli broke the quiet first. He reached toward a photo on the hearth. Daniel, laughing, a fresh-felled pine behind him like a trophy. Dad used to call every tree by name, he said, voice small but sure. He'd pat the trunk and say, "Thank you kindly, old friend," right before the cut. Said it kept him honest. Sarah's mouth quirked at the memory. He'd talk to the saw, too. Claimed it listened better than people. Gabe smiled, though there was a pinch of wistfulness near his eyes. Respect, he murmured. Only real lumberjacks do that. Eli turned the frame over in his hands. The glass caught firelight, making the frozen laughter seem alive again. The day he died, he promised we'd build a treehouse out back. He traced the photo's edge. I still spot the stump on my way to school looks lonely. Sarah inhaled, steadying herself. Daniel would have finished it if he could. Her gaze drifted to the dancing flames. The cable snapped. No one saw it coming. He was gone before they called the ambulance. Shadow inched closer, resting his head on Eli's Thea silent anchor. Gabe swallowed. I know a bit about things ending too fast. He stared into his tea, fingers tightening around the mug. Back in Kandahar, 6 men in my unit were alive 1 second, gone the next. Shadow pulled me clear, but his voice cracked. I walked away when they didn't. Eli's brows knit. That isn't your fault. But Gabe's eyes stayed dark, as if replaying footage only he could see. Sarah leaned forward, the rocker creaking. Sometimes, it's the living who carry the heaviest burdens, she said softly. The ones left to wonder why. Gabe looked up, surprise mixing with pain. I tried to find him for years, he whispered, nodding toward Shadow. Filed reports. No one answered. Then I quit looking. I told myself it was over. Tried to be okay with that. He exhaled a trembling breath. Seeing him in the fire footage felt like a punch. Survivor's guilt doesn't age out, turns out. Eli reached across Shadow's back, resting a hand on Gabe's wrist. The boy's eyes gleamed, not with pity, but something steadier. Shadow kept going until he found someone else to protect, he said. And you kept living. Dad always said the most dangerous thing about the woods is forgetting to move forward. Sarah nodded, eyes glistening. Grief's a wilderness, Gabe. My compass was Ellie and Daniel's stories. She gestured toward the mantel. You two have the same compass, that dog and what he stands for. Gabe let the words sink in. The fire popped. Shadow's ear flicked at the sound. But he didn't lift his head. He seemed to know his people were busy healing. Finally, Gabe cleared his throat. Your dad, he said to Eli. Sounds like the sort who measured worth by stewardship. That and pancake flipping skills? Eli replied. A small grin surfaced. He could scribe our initials in batter. Sarah chuckled. Cursive Panchakesh's legacy. Gabe set his mug down. Maybe that treehouse still needs building. Eli's eyes widened. You think? With some help, Gabe added. Shadow supervising, of course. Shadow thumped his tail once against the rug, as if to say plans approved. Warmth settled over the four of them, fire heat mingling with a quieter ember. Recognition that love, loss, and duty could weave strangers into family. Eli leaned back against the sofa, absently stroking the tooling on Shadow's collar. Dad always told me a real home has three things. Laughter, work worth doing, and a fire to gather round. He glanced at Sarah, then Gabe, then Marla hovering in the doorway with Coco, unseen, but listening. Feels like all three are here tonight. Sarah's reply came on a soft breath. Then we're on the right trail, honey. Oh, outside, the wind whispered through the pines Daniel once named, carrying ember scent and newfound resolve into the starlit dark. Inside, by firelight, grief softened, not erased, but shared and in the sharing, made bearable. Shadow stretched, sighed, and closed his eyes. An old soldier finally off duty, content to dream beneath a roof held up by stories, forgiveness, and the promise of a treehouse yet to rise. Dawn came slow, a pale rinse of powder blue erasing the night above Clearwater. The house still breathed the faint smell of yesterday's firewood, but the world outside tasted of dew and cedar. Eli eased open the screen door, a soft squeak that only Shadow seemed to hear. The shepherd limped after him onto the porch, paused silent on the gray planks. The new leather collar oak leaf tooling and all gleamed when first light kissed its edge. Eli carried a worn horsehair brush in one hand, the other cradling a tin cup of warm water. Easy morning, bud, he whispered, settling cross-legged near the railing. His voice felt different in the householder somehow, like it understood things his body hadn't grown into yet. Shadow lowered himself beside the boy with a practiced grace that belied the stiffness in his joints. He exhaled, eyes half-lidded, tail sweeping once in greeting. From the yard, a lone robin broke the silence, then hushed again, as if acknowledging sacred space. Eli dipped the brush bristles into the water, shook off the excess, and began at Shadow's shoulder-slow meditative strokes that skimmed across patchy fur and the faint rise of healed scars. Sit, Eli murmured, hardly louder than the sigh of morning breeze. Shadow shifted, haunches tucking neatly beneath him. No hesitation, no stiff soldier's posture, just an obedient ease, as if the command were a bedtime story he'd heard 1,000 times and never once feared. Eli smiled. Good. Stand down. The shepherd's muscles relaxed even more. His head sank low, ears softening to the sides. The words had once meant vigilance off, but today they sounded like permission to rest. Eli brushed along the neck, careful around the collar. The leather was still pliant, but the history it carried felt weighty in his hand. He thought of his grandfather teaching unknown dogs to trust, of Marla's eyes when she passed the heirloom forward. Rest easy, Eli whispered next. Shadow laid his chin on Eli's knee. The gesture wasn't submission. It was conversation. I'm here. I hear you. The boy kept brushing. Long strokes down the ribcage. Tiny circles over the calloused elbows, finishing each pass with a gentle flick that set loose hairs sailing into mellow light. His whispers continue familiar, patient. Stay. Shadow froze, but not in rigid duty. He stayed because being here was better than anywhere else. A cardinal chirped from the maple tree. A pickup down on County Line Road started its engine. Still, neither boy nor dog broke the spell. Eli paused, knuckles grazing the dog's cheek. Guard! For a heartbeat, Shadow's ears flicked forward, eyes sharpening on the yard the way a lighthouse fixes on open sea. But the tension evaporated as quickly as it formed, replaced by a slow blink that said, "The world can wait. I know my place." "You don't have to. I know," Eli breathed. "Old habits, right?" Shadow answered with a low, content huff. His tail thumped twice against the planks. Eli returned to the brush, moving toward the hindquarters where the fur was coarser. "You remember," he said, "but you're not doing it 'cause you have to. You're doing it 'cause you choose." As if acknowledging the truth of that, Shadow tipped his head, nuzzling Eli's forearm. The collar jangled softly an old song on new strings. A breeze slid over the porch, bringing the smell of hay and wild chamomile from the pasture. Sunlight nudged higher, turning the distant barn roof to bright pewter. In that light, Eli saw strands of silver in Shadow's coat he'd never noticed threads of time woven between darker fibers. "You're beautiful, you know," he said, feeling the ridiculousness of complimenting a snarled old shepherd and not caring at all. He set the brush aside, running fingertips through freshly groomed fur. The dog leaned into every touch, eyelids fluttering with trust. After a long moment, Eli spoke again, less to Shadow than to the morning itself. "When Dad was alive, he'd take me out this early and say the world's quietest truths only speak when other noises sleep. I guess I hear them better now." Shadow lifted his head, gaze level with the boy's. Eli rested his forehead against the aging skull. "The truth I hear is that broken things aren't worthless. They're just seasoned. Like wood in a campfire, they burn longer, warmer." A humming silence followed, where breath and breeze three-legged raced through time. Then Shadow licked the bridge of Eli's Nozowan's slow, deliberate swipe. Less slobber than seal. Eli laughed soft, surprised, wholly bright. Okay, brushing session over." He set the cup aside and rose. Shadow rose too, joints cracking but spirit fluid. Together they stepped to the porch edge, looking out over pasture and beyond, to the tree line that still held a half-imagined treehouse in its promise. Sunlight crawled across grass blades, leaving diamonds of dew in its wake. Eli stretched, pocketing the brush. "Breakfast?" Shadow barked a single, playful note that startled a pair of doves into flight. It wasn't a war bark or a warning. It was an invitation. Let's live. They patted inside boy first, dog close leaving the porch empty but for the swirling motes of shed fur and the gentle creak of boards, echoing a bond no longer rooted in commands, but in calm. Somewhere in the quiet house, Sarah hummed a hymn as coffee brewed. Gabe shuffled through blueprints for a treehouse, destined at last to rise. Marla clinked dishes, the melody of ordinary life mending itself. Eli glanced down the hallway at his companion, who trotted beside him with a slight limp yet a ready tail. "Come on, hero," he said, using the new title like a secret handshake. "We've got pancakes to flip." Shadow's ears perked. He nudged Eli's hand as if to steer him toward the kitchen, toward warmth, aroma, and family. They walked on, paw steps and heartbeats aligning in unhurried rhythm. Commands weren't needed now. The war stories belonged to yesterday. Today held softer missions, brush strokes in dawn light, the rustle of bandana against graying fur, and a boy who'd learned that the bravest gestures can be silent. Outside, the sunrise hit full and bright, flooding the porch with gold illuminating a wooden swing, an empty brush, and lingering air still humming with an old oath renewed. Guard the ones you love not by force, but by peace found and freely shared. The morning sun streamed into Eli's bedroom, igniting dust motes like tiny comets. He hadn't slept today. It wasn't just any Friday. It was graduation day. his first real step into what comes next. On a chair by the closet hung his best clothes, a navy shirt, khaki slacks, and beside them, Shadow's gear-polished leather collar and a tarnished Army Tactical Support insignia tied with faded olive ribbon. Eli's friend Gabe had drilled a tiny hole in the metal so it could hang like a pendant, not military protocol, more like a badge of honor. Downstairs, the smell of cinnamon and oranges drifted through the house. At the table, Sarah hummed as she plated breakfast, and Marla adjusted her sunflower scarf. Shadow waited between them, tail sweeping in slow arcs, eyes catching the morning light. "Morning, graduate," Sarah called. Marla added, "Eat while it's hot, or you'll walk that stage running on nerves and air." Eli knelt to fit the collar onto Shadow with care. "Ready to show off your bling?" The old shepherd woofed softly, nuzzling him toward the table. They ate together French toast, berries, cocoa around a pine plank table Daniel had built in calmer days. Conversation wandered from reminders to memories. Eli memorized it all. The clink of forks, Marla's dry laugh, Shadow's panting each time he got a blueberry from under the table. Afterward, Sarah handed Eli a small craft paper box. Inside lay a steel tie clip etched with an oak leaf. "It was Dad's," she said. "He wore it when he testified before the forestry board. Said roots matter more than branches." Eli's voice trembled. "I'll take care of it." They left just after 8. The truck rumbled past hand-painted banners. "Congrats, class of 25. Go Ellie and Shadow." In the cab, Sarah drove. Marla held flowers, and Eli sat with Shadow's head on his lap. Wind ruffled the dog's ears. "Ready?" Sarah asked. Eli met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "As I'll ever be." "You've got 4 paws of backup," Marla added. Eli chuckled, adjusting his tie and clipping the oak leaf into place. "Guard," he whispered. Shadow's posture shifted steady, calm not, watching for threats, just present. Eli realized it wasn't war that taught Shadow to guard. It was love. They reached the gym. Balloons bobbed. Band music filtered through open doors. "Let's go make 'em cry," Marla joked. Eli stepped out, Shadow beside him, both steady. As they walked toward the gym, some parents clapped, some simply watched. Eli didn't feel nervous, just proud. Inside, rows of 5th graders sat beneath streamers. Parents whispered reminders. Sarah and Marla stood near the front. Gabe leaned against the wall, soldier steady, but soft-eyed. Near the doors, Eli and Shadow waited. The shepherd sat calm, his mettle catching the lights. "Look, it's the hero dog," classmates whispered. Principal Harker approached. "You're last. Want a reminder?" "I'm good," Eli said. Harker knelt. "Try not to steal the show, pal." Shadow gave him a polite lick. The lights dimmed. One by one, graduates crossed the stage. Applause swelled with each name. Finally, Harker spoke into the mic. "Our closing reflection comes from a student whose quiet leadership reminded us that kindness lights an entire town. Please welcome Eli Barrett." Polite claps turned thunderous as Shadow padded forward. At the podium, Eli hesitated, then found Shadow's gaze. He began. "When I met Ash, he used the name Clearwater New. Some said he was too old, too broken. But the bravest hearts wear fur and scars." The room stilled. Ash didn't learn courage here. He learned it dragging someone he loved from an explosion. And again, when he walked into fire for a boy he didn't know. He teaches it to me every morning when he limps out to stand guard by the bus. A camera clicked. Sarah sniffled. "People say I saved Ash at that auction barn. But the truth is, she saved me first. He showed me hero doesn't mean perfect or new. It means still loving, even after life tries to burn that love away." He drew breath. "So, if you ever feel too small, too damaged, too tired, remember, being broken doesn't end your story. It proves you were strong enough to live it." He turned slightly, hand on Shadow. "Ash, guard." A beat. Then Shadow rose as low, but sure spine straight, eyes sweeping the crowd. His metal chimed like a bell through silence. The gym erupted. Parents stood. Kids whooped. The brass band forgot their cue and clapped their instruments together. Shadow stood still, sentinel calm. Eli didn't wave. He laid a hand on Shadow's shoulder and smiled. This wasn't the end of childhood, it was the beginning of purpose. As applause ebbed, Harker returned, voice thick. "Thank you, Eliand. Thank you, Ashfor, reminding us what service really looks like." The recessional began. As classmates walked off stage, many paused to pat Shadow's back. Each touch sparked something wordless gratitude made real. Sarah and Marla waited below. Gabe raised his camera and caught it. Boy and dog bathed in sunlight. Eli whispered something to Shadow. The dog's tail swept slow and steady. They walked out past the streamers, past the warmth into a world just beginning. Behind them, applause lingered. Then it rose again, not for sound, but for meaning. Parents stepped down. Kids followed. Teachers guided. A corridor formed from the stage to the Dorsa living aisle of open hands. Eli whispered, "Heal." Shadow aligned at his side. They walked together, people reaching out to touch Shadow's fur, to shake Eli's hand. Each gesture rewrote years of neglect and gunfire. Each pat a benediction. Gabe stepped forward. "Proud of you, son." Eli nodded, full to bursting. Quinn handed Eli a photo lanterns over a fundraiser. "For your treehouse, M8. Connor muttered, "Dog's cool." "You too." Shadow sniffed him with approval. At the end, Sarah and Marla embraced them both. Wildflowers crushed between arms. Tears falling freely. Outside, summer waited like a blank page. Bellflowers swayed. The air smelled of grass and river. "No more speeches," Eli said. Shadow barked once playful. Freehan nudged him toward the truck where Gabe had lumber ready for a treehouse. They didn't look back. They didn't need to. The applause was still echoing in their steps, their hearts, and in a town that had witnessed something rare. A boy and a broken dog. Walking forward, whole. Autumn unfurled over Clearwater on the wings of a gentle northerly, trading summer's cricket lullabies for the whisper of maple leaves gone bronze and gold. On the library, Lawnance Plain, now ribbon-strung and freshly mown neighbors gathered in scarves and flannels, breath-puffing like lanterns in the crisp October air. A rope of marigolds arced from lamppost to lamppost. Folding chairs dotted the grass in imperfect rows. Children chased one another between ankles until parents reined them in with soft shushes. "It's starting, honey. Come see." At the lawn center stood a tall object cloaked in navy canvas. Its silhouette ears pricked, chest broad, tail curled, neatly left little doubt whom it honored. Yet anticipation hummed all the same. A portable podium faced the shape. Beside it, a weather-stained shoebox held handwritten note cards, though rumor said the speaker wouldn't use them. Eli Barrett adjusted the oak leaf tie clip beneath his jacket collar and stepped up. He felt taller these days, though that might have been the confidence rather than the inch he'd sprouted over summer. Shadow forever Ash to half the county sat at his heel, polished collar snug, metal gleaming like warm coin in the late morning sun. The old shepherd's muzzle had silvered noticeably in 3 short months, but his eyes were bright, watchful, reflecting crowds and banners in calm amber. Mayor Dorsey cleared her throat at the mic, voice carrying a tremor of emotion that no civic ribbon cutting had ever stirred. "Today, we offer a permanent thank you etched in metal, rooted in this ground for a dog who ran into fire and a boy who refused to see brokenness as the end of a story." Applause fluttered, polite and earnest. Eli felt Shadow lean lightly against his calf, and for one heartbeat, he was back in that auction barn-thin light. Dusty straw, a coffee tin rattling with birthday coins scoozing a stranger who turned out to be a hero returned from war. The mayor gestured him forward. Cameras clicked. Cell phones rose. Eli stationed himself at the rope tied to the navy cover. "I won't speak long," he said, voice steady despite the pinch of nerves. "Just this. Heroes don't retire when the world says they're used up. Sometimes they're just waiting to be noticed again. I'm glad we noticed." He tugged the rope. Cloth folded away like night retreating from dawn. Gasps rustled across the crowd. The statue stood 3/4 life-size, forged of burnished bronze, catching sunlight in honeyed glints. Shadow sat regal yet relaxed. One ear slightly canted. The artist had insisted on that imperfection. His head turned as if listening for distant orders. His eyes, though metal, conveyed silent vow. At the base, chiseled into dark granite, 7 simple words, "For the broken ones who still save us." Silence, Puletta, sacred hush. Quinn wiped his glasses on a jacket sleeve. Marla pressed folded palms to her mouth. Even Connor Blake removed his ball cap, holding it against his chest with unstudied reverence. Shadow circled the sculpture, sniffing bronze paws, then sat before it in an almost mirrored pose. Laughter, soft and teary, bubbled through the audience. Gabe stepped forward, hand brushing Eli's shoulder, whispering, "Looks like he recognizes him simultaneously home in two places at once." Library director Mrs. Patel approached with a small velvet pouch. From it, she drew a brass library card Tage engraved with Shadow's name and affixed it to a tiny hook drilled discreetly behind the statue's left ear. "Every child who reads under his watch will remember why words like loyalty exist," she said, eyes shining. Eli closed his own, taking in the crisp air, the scent of cider from the refreshment table, the faint clang of schoolyard bells. A block away, he felt weight lift, something he hadn't known, still pressed upon him, replaced by a calm as solid as the figure before him. Mayor Dorsey raised a final cheer. Applause rolled, not thunderous like graduation's din, but deep and resonant, as though the town itself was exhaling gratitude into bronze and sky. One by one, people approached, veterans laying poppies at the granite base, parents guiding toddlers' hands to trace the lettering, teenagers posing for photos but whispering "thank you" before they grinned for the lens. Shadow took it all in with measured composure. When Miles the boy from the fire stepped forward with blister-free hands to press a drawing of a dog into Eli's palm, the old shepherd bent to nuzzle the child's sleeve, as if ensuring it was whole. Eli crouched, slipping the drawing into the shoebox of cards he'd never used. He stroked Shadow's neck. "Think we did okay?" he murmured. The dog's tail tapped once, twice affirmation enough. Above them, maple leaves released from scarlet stems, drifting past bronze ears, collecting at the inscription's base like metals no forge could craft. The wind carried their rustle through the gathering, mingling with hushed stories of Jasper, of Daisy, of unnamed partners who once patrolled foreign Dustin. With each fluttered leaf, Clearwater remembered, broken isn't the opposite of brave. It is often the proof. And now that truth stood everlasting, cast in metal, seated watchful outside a door of books and beginnings, where every passerby might glimpse a statue and recall a day a dog showed them what hearts are for. Eli rose, laced fingers through Shadow's collar, and together they stepped back, letting the town embrace its newest monument. The applause that mattered now came not from clapping hands, but from rustling leaves, rolling strollers, whispered prayers, and the quiet click of a hero's paw as he turned toward home. The bronze shepherd became part of Clearwater faster than summer cicadas found the power lines. Within a week, a faint footpath carved itself through the grass, tracing a half moon around the statue's granite base. Morning joggers slowed to a walk there. Dusk strollers paused, coffee cooling between their palms, just to linger beneath the watchful ears. It felt less like a monument and more like an old neighbor come home. Marigolds were first bright clusters left by Mrs. Nilsson on her way to Sunday choir, for Lucky, who once pulled me from cold water. By Monday afternoon, a small garden had sprouted purple asters, single-stem roses, even a child's fistful of dandelions stuffed into a jam jar. The library staff placed a weatherproof planter nearby so blooms wouldn't wilt on bare stone, and each dawn Mrs. Patel refreshed the water as reverently as lighting candles. At recess, children migrated to the statue like birds to a familiar branch. Some balanced library books on crossed legs, reading aloud in halting voices while Shadow's bronze twin listened without judgment. Others tucked homework sheets beneath the paw superstition starting already that the hero dog brought luck on spelling tests. One afternoon, Marla watched from the sidewalk as a group of second graders circled the base, tracing the inscription with index fingers, sounding out syllables. F. Or the broken ones who still save us. And they didn't yet grasp the fullness of the phrase, but the cadence settled into their mouths like a promise. Veterans visited Tumost at dawn, before caffeine and town chatter cluttered courage. They came in singles and pairs, uniforms long, packed away, but posture unchanged. They never spoke much, just a palm against cool bronze, a nod, sometimes a quiet, "Easy boy," spoken to a dog who no longer heard commands, yet somehow answered anyway. Eli returned every Saturday at 10 sharp, a Ziploc of homemade liver treats in his pocket. Shadow trotted beside him, muzzle grayer each month, steps still purposeful. The moment they reached the lawn, the shepherd's demeanor shifted, ears tilting forward, tail lowering into a dignified sweep. He approached the statue as though greeting a comrade on duty, nose touching bronze paw, a low rumble in his chest, not quite a growl, not quite a purr, something between recognition and respect. Eli scattered 3 or 4 treats on the grass. Shadow didn't eat them immediately. Instead, he sat, mirroring the statue's pose, gaze roaming the street, as if assuming shared watch. Only after Eli gave a soft okay did he lean down, crunching 1 biscuit while leaving the rest for visiting dogs. The routine never varied. It was, Eli realized, Shadow's version of a salute. On crisp Thursdays, the old shepherd led Gabe there at dawn. Gabe would run a cloth over the insignia plate, thumb brushing the engraved lines like braille of memory. Sometimes he spoke slow recountings of Kandahar nights, of desert dust clogging boots, of voices on comms that never answered back. Shadow listened in silence, head pressed to Gabe's thigh. When the stories grew heavy, Gabe would rest both hands on those bronze shoulders and let the weight drain through metal into earth. The town absorbed it all: flowers, whispered war names, children's giggles like roots taking in rainwater, and slowly, an invisible current hummed between hearts that once beat in separate rhythms. The statue had become a common key in different locks: grief, gratitude, wonder, reprieve. Eli felt it, each visit. One Saturday, he arrived to find a crocheted scarf olive in sand, stripes looped round the bronze dog's neck. A tag read, "Made by Emma, age 79, for warm patrols on cold nights." Next to it sat a tin toy soldier, arms molded in stiff salute, placed carefully between front paws. The donor had signed only, "Brother, 1968, never forgotten." Eli added nothing that day. He simply sat on the grass, shadows sprawled at his knee, and let the layers of offerings settle around them like falling leaves. Autumn deepened. Maples bled crimson, then brittle brown. The librarian petitioned for a small awning so snow wouldn't cake the statue come winter. Town council approved unanimously. Shadow's walks, slowed hips, stiffening, breathing, a fraction shallower butt. Every Saturday, he tugged the leash with puppy insistence, as if the world could wait, but duty could not. Eli sometimes wondered whether the dog truly understood the bronze reflection, or if some gentler instinct guided him. This is where they remember me. This is where I stand, so they remember others too. On a blustery November morning, Eli arrived to find a college-age stranger kneeling before the statue, tears inked on wind-chapped cheeks. A German Shepherd ID tag dangled from a chain in her fist. She pressed it to the granite inscription, lips moving soundlessly. When she noticed Eli, she offered a watery smile. "He was my dad's. Saved him after an avalanche. Figured this was the right place." Eli only nodded, handing her one of Shadow's biscuits in silent camaraderie. She laughed through her tears and placed the treat at bronze paws before walking away lighter. Weeks turned pages. Thanksgiving parades, then Christmas lights. The statue gathered scarves, pine boughs, and tiny battery-lit candles flickering like steadfast eyes through snowy twilights. Each Saturday, the path of footprints, deepened dog paws, boot prints, child-sized galoshes tracing love in white. And always Eli came. Always Shadow claimed his watchful seat. The shepherd seemed to know. Legacy wasn't marble and metal. It was repetition, presence, the act of showing up for the remembering. One night, months later, Eli dreamt of a great aurora sweeping above the lawn bronze dog and living dog, howling in shared joy beneath ribbons of green light. When he woke, Shadow lay against him, heartbeat slow but sure, as though the dream were simply another patrol completed. Clearwater, continued school bells, furnace hums, gossip at Carter's General Storiette. A soft anchor held the town steady. A statue, a story, a weekly ritual of pause and peace. The broken ones had saved them, and now Clearwater saved them back pedal by pedal, nod by nod, silence by silence. Shadow never missed his visit, not once. And in every slow step toward that bronze reflection, Eli understood deeper what the inscription had tried to say. Some heroes earn eternity, not by living forever, but by teaching everyone else how to. Summer's first real heat broke just before evening, leaving Clearwater awash in that hush that comes after a rainless day finally exhales. Crickets tuned their legs in the ditches. Frogs began a slow march chorus down at the creek. In the Barrett back pasture, the grass stood hip-high and velvet, mottled by shadows from a rising half-moon. Eli eased through the gate with Shadow Ash, 2 old headlines ambling at his side. The shepherd's gait had shortened. Each step carried the careful deliberation of age. Yet, when the boy, now 13 but stretching toward 14, loosed the lead, Shadow found enough spark to trot a lazy circle, nose-gulping clover scent before sinking into the cool thatch. Eli dropped beside him, folding long legs under lanky limbs. They lay shoulder to wither, boy and dog, while the sky shifted from pewter to lavender to molten copper. One by one, tiny lanterns winked on fireflies lifting from grass blades, pulsing their green-gold code into the dusk. For several breaths, they said nothing. The rustle of cottonwood leaves sang lullaby, a distant train horn stitched low across the valley. Eli let his palm explore the ridge of Shadow's spine. Mapping familiar topography, scar tissue softened. Muscles thinned, but still resilient beneath sable and silver fur. "Remember the first night here?" Eli murmured. "We slept in the barn. You wouldn't close your eyes unless my foot touched your shoulder." He chuckled, soft. "Grandma thought I'd freeze out there. Guess we both ran a little wild." Shadow's tail brushed the grass-sown beat. Then still, his ears twitched towards some invisible night mystery. But his body remained anchored to the boy. Fireflies gathered in greater constellation-stinny galaxies, orbiting their own laws. Eli watched one land on Shadow's nose. It glowed, then drifted upward, leaving the shepherd to snort softly in surprise. "You saved me too, you know," Eli said, voice thickening. "Not just from that fire, from being the kid who lost his dad, who felt like everything good got cut down early." He plucked a blade of grass, twisting it nervously. "You made quiet feel safe." Shadow turned his head, eyes amber as old whiskey beneath moonlight. He didn't need words. He never had. The boy exhaled. "Sometimes I think about the auction barn, how close I was to walking past your crate because folks said you were useless." He swallowed. "That would have been the biggest mistake of my life." Shadow's tongue lolled in what passed for a smile. Then he bent and licked Eli's hands low, deliberate, sealing the confession like wax on a letter. The warmth of it traveled up Eli's arm to lodge behind his sternum where gratitude already burned. Crickets fell silent for a breath, as if giving the moment room. The hush felt cathedral-sized. Eli lay back, staring at violet sky where the first brave star pricked through. Shadow adjusted, placing his graying muzzle on the boy's chest, rising and falling with each teenage breath. "Gabe's almost finished the treehouse," Eli whispered to the star. "Says you'll supervise from a shady spot while we paint. Mom's making lemonade. Quinn's bringing that telescope his brother doesn't use anymore." He laughed under his breath. "Guess you inspired a lot of plans." Shadow's ear flicked, the metal on his collar giving a faint clink as if acknowledging project status. Above them, fireflies thickened until they seemed to mirror the sky's widening constellations. Land and heavens blinked in tandem, a Morse code conversation bridging worlds. Eli imagined each pulse spelled a thank you, for rescues seen and unseen, for walks slowed but never canceled, for broken hearts soldered into stronger shapes. Finally, he spoke the thought rawest in his chest. "If you need to rest soon, it's okay." His thumb stroked the oak leaf tooling on Shadow's collar. "You've earned every quiet meadow." The shepherd didn't stir, only his tail whispered against grass. And Eli realized the dog understood deep in marrow, deeper in whatever place memories wedged between cell and spirit. Peace had already rooted there. They lay until the western horizon smoldered out, leaving only silver moon and green sparks. When at last Eli rose, Shadow did too slow, but steady. Together they walked back toward porch light, fireflies parting like gentle guard escorts. At the gate, Eli paused, casting one more glance over shoulder. The meadow glowed with wandering embers of life, as if earth itself breathed gratitude. He squeezed the latch, murmured to the night, "Good watch, old man." Shadow stepped through, the scrape of his claws on dirt, sounding like a final punctuation mark on Twilight's prayer. And, dusk having, witnessed vow, and reply settled into gold behind them. Snow fell in the hush before daylight's slow, deliberate flakes that seemed reluctant to disturb Clearwater's sleeping roofs. By the time the rooster crowed, every fence post wore a white cap, and the barn stood mitten-soft beneath its drifted eaves, like an old soldier wrapped in a quilt. Inside, hay bales exhaled the faint, sweet musk of summer long gone. A kerosene lantern cast amber halos on rough beams, and beneath its glow lay Shadow, curled on the rocket ship blanket that had journeyed with him from first night to this one. His breaths came shallow, inaudible except when they caught on a wheeze, then slipped free again like frosted glass clearing. Eli pushed the door open with care, winter air brushing his cheeks red. He'd grown taller, shoulders broadening, but the knitted cap, tugged low over unruly hair, still made him look like that 11-year-old who once carried a coffee tin of coins. Snowflakes clung to his jacket, melting into dark constellations. "Morning, partner," he whispered, kneeling beside the shepherd. The dog's ears twitched at the sound, eyes half unfolding. Their amber held no pain, only tired acceptance, the glow of embers versus flame. The metal on Shadow's collar rested against his chest, dulled by years of wear, yet catching the lantern light with a soft glimmer of rank retained. Eli set a thermos near the blanket, then opened the worn paperback he carried. Hero Dogs of America. Pages curled at edges, margin notes in pencil, dog-eared chapters devoted to rescue missions, war stories, and therapy miracles. He'd read every line aloud more than once. Shadow seemed to rest easier on the cadence. Snow tapped the roof like timid applause while Eli began again, voice low but steady. Chapter 12, Courage on the Home Front. He cleared his throat. In small towns across the country, retired service dogs continue to serve in unexpected ways. Shadow's chest rose, fell, rose. Eli read on, tracing sentences with a fingertip when the lantern flickered, as though guiding the words directly into the shepherd's ears. Outside, wind teased the doorframe, rattling memories of distant chopper blades and auction barn whispers. But inside remained pocket warm, boy, dog, story. At a pause, Eli glanced up. "You hear that, old man? They're talking about you." A grin tugged his lips, though moisture rimmed his eyes. He stroked the fur along Shadow's neck thinned, silvered, still impossibly soft, and felt the faint thrum of heartbeat beneath. He resumed reading, but his voice wandered off script, weaving commentary between paragraphs. "Remember when Gabe tried to teach me hand signals, and I kept saluting backward? You barked like I'd told you to spin." A chuckle escaped, cracked and gentle. "Grandma still says that was your laugh." Shadow's tail moved a fraction, brushing blanket fringe. Eli closed the book, letting it rest open on his knee. Silence pressed in, filled only by the ticking lantern and the whisper of snow settling against walls. He realized his father would have loved this silence. Wood, winter, a son who'd learned that bravery could be quiet. Eli leaned closer, forehead nearly touching Shadow's. "They say your kind give everything," he murmured. "But you kept something for me enough to grow a life around." Breath clouded the air between them, then melted. "I can't pay that back, but I can stay until you're ready." Shadow's eyes drifted shut, lids fluttering as if chasing dream birds across open fields. Eli slipped down to lie beside him, head on folded arm, the book forming a makeshift pillow for the dog's paw. Snowlight seeped through cracks in the loft boards, dusting them both in pale gold. Minutes stretched maybe hours. At one point, lantern oil hissed low. Eli reached to trim the wick, amber glow steadying. He sipped cocoa from the thermos, then poured a spoonful of warm broth into a shallow dish, coaxing Shadow with gentle taps. The shepherd managed a few laps, then sighed against the blanket, content. Eli picked up the book again, but instead of reading, he spoke a promise, voice barely above a breath. "Treehouse is done. Quinn painted constellations on the ceiling. You'd like that. Gabe hung your old harness on the wall." His throat tightened. "Every nail we hammered felt like saying thank you." Oh, outside, morning brightened. The barn door window frosted at the edges, crystallizing into delicate arrows pointing inward toward center, toward heart. Inside, two silhouettes lay still, one old, one young, both shadowed under a quilt of half-century hay scent and lantern light. Shadow's breathing slowed further, body easing into a depth of rest Eli hadn't seen before. No shiver of nightmare disturbed his limbs. No distant echo of gunfire in a twitching ear. Just calm. Eli brushed knuckles over the shepherd's brow. "Stand down," he whispered the command that had always settled them both. A final exhale puffed warm against his wrist. The shepherd's chest stilled so gently, Eli almost missed the moment. But then the hush deepened, weight shifting in the room, as if the barn itself held a breath in reverence. Tears blurred the world, but Eli did not sob. Instead, he pressed his cheek to that quiet paw atop Hero Dog's, letting grief pool slow and sacred. Snow creaked on the roof. A soft benediction. Minutes later, he rose, tucked the blanket around Shadow's frame, and extinguished the lantern. Dawn light poured through the high window, bathing bronze-furred stillness in gold, final metal pinned by the sun. Eli whispered into the silence, "Good watch, soldier," then pushed open the barn door. Cold air swept in, carrying pine, snow, and the distant call of a chickadee greeting daybreak. He stepped outside, closing the door with gentle finality, heart heavy yet strangely light, like a flag returning at half-mast but still proud upon the pole. Behind him, the barn stood sentinel beneath January sky, and if the boy dared believe it, he would have sworn the quiet within was not absence, but presence, an old guardian released to larger fields, still keeping watch wherever broken ones rise to save again. The snow had stopped in the night, leaving the world blank and sound soft. A pale indigo stillness hovered over Clearwater, broken only by the distant hum of Gabe's truck warming in the driveway and the faint clatter of Marla's teacup in the kitchen. Inside the barn, kerosene lanterns rested cold. Eli hadn't needed them. He'd kept vigil by moonlight instead. Shadow lay on the rocket ship blanket exactly where Eli had left him hours before, body curled in gentle repose, muzzle pillowed on faded fabric planets. His chest did not rise as high as yesterday, but each breath slipped out easy, untroubled, like wind sighing through pine. Eli knelt, wool coat spread beneath his knees. He pressed the back of his fingers to the shepherd's ribcage. Warmth lingered, heartbeat slow, a metronome winding down its final bars. Snowlight from the loft window painted the dog's fur in soft blues and silvers, transforming scars into stories etched in moonstone. He brushed Shadow's ear. "Morning, buddy." Ugh. No ear flick, no tail thump. Yet something in the quiet felt answered as though the old warrior had acknowledged him on a deeper frequency. Footsteps creaked outside, measured and familiar. Marla pushed the barn door open just wide enough to slip through, shawl wrapped tight. Her breath smoked in the chill. Her eyes softened at the tableau of boy and dog. "How is he?" she asked, voice cotton. "Still here," Eli whispered. Though he knew the truth carried a different tense, he stroked Shadow's Kalar the oak leaves cool beneath his thumb. "He hasn't stood since yesterday evening, but he's not hurting." Marla lowered herself onto a hay bale, joints complaining. She watched the shepherd for a long, reverent moment. Then, as if reciting scripture, she murmured, "Your grandpa used to say, 'When it's time, open the door. Let the spirit choose the horizon it wants.'" Eli swallowed. He remembered the phrase from bedtime story-a tales of trail-worn mules and old farm dogs who walked into fields at dawn and did not return. He hadn't understood then. He understood now. He leaned down, forehead touching Shadow's. "Thank you," he breathed, the words fogging against frosted whiskers. "For every guard, every breath, every fire you carried us through." Snow slid from the roof with a muffled thud, shaking loose, a drift of sparkling crystals through a gap in the eaves. They cascaded over dog and boy-like confetti, catching faint sunrise glow that seeped through cracks. Eli straightened and looked at Marla. She nodded on see no rush. No pressure, then gestured with a tilt of her chin toward the broad double doors at the far end of the barn, those same doors that first welcomed Shadow home. Eli rose. Each step toward the latch felt weighted, yet buoyed by steady purpose. He unhooked the heavy iron bar. Wood groaned, hinges yawning open. Outside, dawn waited like a held breath. A band of gold crowned the ridgeline, flushing pink into low clouds, promising maple syrup light to follow. Frigid air swept in, swirling hay dust into dancing motes. It brushed Shadow's fur. The dog's nostrils twitched once, catching sunrise, scent pine, snow, cold dirt ready for thaw. Eli watched, heart hammering a drum both sorrowful and grateful. Shadow's eyes opened slivers of amber meeting morning's first glint. No fear, no confusion. Recognition of light perhaps, or of invitation. A final inhale expanded his ribs. Exhale eased out like a candle surrendering flame. Stillness. Eli's breath caught, then left him in a soft sob that was somehow more reverence than grief. He lowered to his knees beside the shepherd, hands gentle on collar and paw. The sun inched higher, rays spearing through the open doorway, spilling over blanket and straw until the barn seemed lit from inside by holy fire. Marla approached, resting a firm, warm palm on Eli's shoulder. No words. The quiet carried all. Together they sat as the gold deepened, spreading across fur and floorboards, climbing timber beams as if to write the dog's name in mourning. Minutes slipped by, or maybe lifetimes. When the sun cleared the ridge fully, Eli rose and moved to the doorway. The pasture beyond glittered, every snow crystal winking like tiny medals laid in honor guard. He imagined Shadow running their young again, legs sure, ears flying chasing the horizon Grandpa once promised. He whispered to the open air, "Stand down, soldier. Doors open." Wind answered with a gentle push across the threshold, ruffling his hair, stirring the rocket ship blanket one last time. Behind him, Marla's voice is soft as snowfall broke the hush. "He's on patrol someplace bright now." Eli nodded, tears cold on cheeks, but heart warm. He closed the latch halfway, leaving the gap wide enough for light to pour through, narrow enough to cradle memory. Then he knelt again, smoothing fur along Shadow's back, grateful that the body left behind still radiated peace. In his chest, sorrow and pride braided into something sturdier rope to pull him toward tomorrow. Outside, a chickadee landed on the fence post, singing the first clear note of the new day. Eli listened, then whispered to his sleeping friend, "Hear that? World still needs watching. I'll take the next shift." Sunrise streamed in, painting farewell in gold, and the barn, keeper of beginnings and endings, stood witness as boy, dog, and dawn wrote their last line together. Door open, light flooding, love unbroken. May brushed fresh green across clear water, soft as a mother's palm after a long winter vigil. Tulips flared around the library steps, and robins tugged worms from damp soil where snowdrifts had crouched just weeks before. The bronze shepherd shadow immortalized wore a wreath of yellow daffodils today, placed by unknown hands at dawn. Sunlight slid over his metal shoulders, setting the inscription aglow, "For the broken ones who still save us." Eli Barrett, newly 14, paused at the edge of the lawn. A slim leash looped through his fingers, attached to a gangly caramel and white mutt with paws 2 sizes too big. The pup strained forward, nose twitching at squirrel scent, tail helicoptering until Eli gave a gentle, grounding click of tongue. The dog bounced back to sit, crookedly, tongue-lolling, eyes bright with the boundless faith of fresh beginnings. "Easy, Ember," Eli murmured. They'd found her at the county shelter in March, half pointer, half question mark, all spark. A wildfire had displaced her litter upstate. Only Ember had survived. When Eli saw the singed edges of her ears, he felt a tug, not unlike the one that had drawn him to Shadow years before. Old pain meeting new promise. They crossed the grass. The pup's enthusiasm slowed as they neared the statue, as if even raw energy recognized reverence. Eli knelt before the bronze figure. His gaze roamed the familiar tilt of ears, the knowing calm etched into metal eyes. 4 months had thinned grief's sharpest edges, but they'd also revealed how silence can ring with presence long after paw prints fade. He reached out, fingertips brushing cool bronze. "Morning, Captain," he whispered, title Gabe occasionally used when speaking of Shadow's service days. "Reporting for duty." Ember mimicked his posture, lowering into an awkward sit. She cocked her head at the statue, then at Eli, then back as though waiting for instructions in a language she hadn't yet learned but was eager to. Eli smiled. "New recruit." He patted the pup's chest. "Smart, fast. Little rough around the edges. Figured you wouldn't mind if I kept the mission going." Wind stirred the daffodil wreath. A petal drifted loose, landing on Ember's nose. She sneezed it away, then glanced up at Eli as if to ask, "Training now?" He laughed softly, shadowed only briefly by memory of another sneeze. Another nose, older and nobler. "First lesson," he said, turning to the statue. "Always listen." He closed his eyes, letting sounds settle. Children's laughter from the reading bench. The distant chop of Gabe's saw at the nearly finished treehouse. The rhythmic thump of Marla's rocker on the porch as she shelled peas for supper. All the heartbeats Shadow had once guarded, still beating. Opening his eyes, Eli leaned toward the bronze ear. "I'll keep doing what you taught me," he pledged, voice steady. "I'll stand when it's hard, run when someone's lost, rest when the work is done. And I'll teach her." He ruffled Ember's floppy ear to do the same. A warmth not physical but unmistakable spread through his chest, as though the statue absorbed the promise and returned it brighter. He imagined Shadow somewhere beyond sightline, tail sweeping approval across endless meadow. Ember rose, gave a tiny bark at a passing butterfly. Eli chuckled. "Guard," he said, testing. The pup straightened, puzzled but attentive, waiting for his lead. It would take time hours of repetition, miles of patience, but time was a gift, and patience a tribute to the teacher now cast in bronze. He stood, brushed grass from his jeans, and slid 2 liver treats from his pocket. One he broke in half for Ember, the other he tucked beneath the statue's paw beside a fresh note someone had left. "Because of Shadow, I adopted a senior dog. Thank you." Eli read it, heart buoyed, and added a quick reply on the back. "Mission continues." He tied Ember's leash to the reading bench rail and pulled a small spiral notebook and pencil from his backpack. Settling cross-legged at the statue's base, he began sketching ideas for a summer program. Read to a Hero, kids, improving literacy by reading aloud to retired service dogs. Mrs. Patel had already cleared Wednesday mornings. Quinn promised flyers. Gabe said they could build portable shade kennels next to the treehouse scrap. While Eli planned, Ember investigated clover patches, occasionally returning to nose the notebookers, if reminding him that some lessons happen outside tidy bullet points. When he'd finished the outline, he tucked the notebook away, untied the leash, and gazed once more at the statue. "See you next Saturday, Captain," he said. The bronze shepherd, seat of silent watch, answered with unspoken ease. "I'm here, all shifts covered." Eli walked toward Main Street, Ember bounding ahead, then circling back, never letting the leash go taut for long. At the sidewalk's curve, he glanced over his shoulder. Sunlight backlit the statue, turning it briefly to silhouettes, Edfast, Sentinel, forever poised between past and possibility. Ash Shadow was gone in body, but his watch continued, in the lion-hearted pup learning new commands, in a boy unafraid to lead, in a town awakened to courage that wears fur and scars. Eli faced forward, lengthened his stride. Ember matched him, an eager apprentice, paws already printing fresh stories on the dusty path. And behind them, Clearwater breathed easy under the gaze of a guardian who, though stilled in bronze, was still guarding all the same. Every paw print in this story reminds us that love-steady, self-giving love can outshine fire, war, and loss. German shepherds, like Shadow, embody more than courage. They reveal the quiet power of loyalty, the dignity of second chances, and the truth that broken often means battle-tested. When we open our doors to an animal who's been overlooked, we invite hope to walk in beside them. That hope ripples outward. Children learn compassion, veterans find peace, whole towns rediscover their better selves. So let Shadow's legacy guide us. Rescue when you can. Speak gently to those who limp. Celebrate the everyday heroes whose hearts beat under fur. And remember, each act of kindness, whether building a treehouse, reading to a shy dog, or laying a single flower at a bronze paw, threads another strand into the larger tapestry of goodness. In honoring animals, we safeguard the best parts of ourselves, proving again and again that love on 4 legs can teach the 2-legged world how to stand tall.